We've been having problems with our audio visual.
Yeah, it's almost reverberating. Now, at first we couldn't hear you. Now, everybody. There we go. Hello.
We might be rebooting the system again.
Okay, sorry. I do that a lot at work. Get dropped. Technology. All right. Good thing I was late, not late.
Okay, we're live.
Okay, very good. Welcome everyone to the June 2nd meeting of Sierra Madre Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call.
Chair Pevsner.
Here.
Vice Chair Dennison. Here. Commissioners Dellis.
Here.
Hutt.
Here.
And Spears.
Present.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. Before we go on to that, I just want to make an announcement on a proposed change to the agenda, just so people in the audience know. For tonight's action item, I'm going to allow public comment after we have deliberations. So during the community input section, when it's to speak on something not on the agenda, and I'm going to let you speak after we have deliberations on action item number 1, A through E. You will be able to bring up anything at that time, so I appreciate if you don't come up and talk on the meadows as a non-discussion item. Okay, I hope that's clear. So if you're here for something else, that's fine. Anyway, with that, I'll start with the approval of the agenda.
Move we accept with the proposed modifications. Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good. Moving forward. Minutes of the May 19th meeting. Anybody have any changes, additions? Bob?
I abstained because I wasn't here.
Okay.
I move we accept as presented.
Second.
So, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. We have our council liaison report, but I think she's just available and watching. I don't think she doesn't have any issues, correct?
There's no report.
Okay, thank you. Very good. All right, so that brings us to community input.
If I could
Go ahead.
interject really quickly, I would like to introduce Matthew Summers.
Oh, yes.
He's a senior counsel with Cullen, Tano, Highsmith, and Watley. And our regular city attorney is out of the office, and Mr. Summers has agreed to sit in for us.
Very good.
And I'll just add that I'm not replacing Alex, not at all. He'll be back for your next regular meeting. But I am familiar with the project. I've been advising him on the back end regarding the project as it's gone along. So I'm familiar with it and happy to be here tonight.
Good. Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right, so then with that brings us to community input. That's the time. Anybody can come up and speak on something that's not on the agenda this evening. You have, how many minutes am I allowing? Let's see.
We have 3.
I'll give you 3.
Thank you.
If you need a little extra, we'll go ahead.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Natalia Flores, and I'm with the Sierra Madre Fire Department. I'm here tonight to just speak to you all about a couple of events we have coming up in the month of June, starting with an educational forum that we have on June 15th. This is the Get Wildfire Set Forum, and this educational workshop will be focusing on the set component of the Ready, Set, Go model. We'll be focusing on wildfire action plans. We will be receiving a presentation by a local insurance broker on wildfire home insurance. And we'll be receiving a presentation by our EMS coordinator on creating an emergency supply kit. This event will be taking place on Wednesday, June 15th at 6 p.m. at the fire station. At the end of the event, we will also be raffling an emergency supply kit that will be valued at $150. Our next event will be Saturday, June 25th. That'll be our 3rd Smart Chipper and Green Waste event. Registration for that event is now open and can be done easily by going to smfdchipperday.eventbrite.com. Registration for that event closes on June 17th, and this is the third and final Chipper event for the year, so we're really encouraging our residents to take advantage of the program. This program allows residents to save hundreds of dollars in hauling and chipping services, and you will have your chippings and hauled by our very own Chief Bartlett. So we encourage all residents to register early. And then our third event is on June 12th, and it is from our EMS division, and we will be teaching a class on treating environmental health emergencies. This is a free community class that will also be taking place at the fire station on Sunday, June 12th. Participants will learn life-saving skills and information for treating environmental health emergencies, such as heat exhaustion and heat strokes, drownings, small animal bites, and more. Registration for this event is required and can be easily done by visiting smfdems.eventbrite.com. There are flyers in the back of the room with all of information for registering. And for any additional questions, please feel free to give us a call at the fire department. And that is all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This is your flyer, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, great. So we're all here for, oh, go ahead. Come on.
Good evening. These abbreviated comments are from Barbara Velturo, who couldn't be here today. And so I don't think this is considered an agenda item. It's in response to the May 5th Planning Commission meeting. So Chair Pevsner had asked Cameron Thornton, a representative of Madre de la Rosa, if there was any factual basis to the claim that a developer represented by Claude Stoff was willing to pay $25 million for the land to build a senior living facility that would include a park.
I'm okay.
And so in response, Madre de la Rosa representative Cameron Thornton said, quote, "Mr. Stoff called me in March 2020 in the height of negotiations for the MOU," unquote. And Mr. Thornton said he told Mr. Stoff they were in the process of completing an MOU with the city and with New Urban West, and that they determined that the single-family residential was best use for the property. He stated that at no time did Mr. Stoff present a contract or a specific offer. He said, quote, "It was all after the point of our negotiations with the city and with New Urban West," unquote. So Mr. Thornton did present true facts about that phone call, but not of his many interactions with Mr. Stoff in the previous years. Nor did he indicate that he had refused to look at, discuss, or consider the plan that Mr. Stoff tried to present to him several times in the years before that point. And so towards that end, in an email sent on April 21st, 2020, before the MOU was signed, Mr. Thornton was responding to an email with the subject line Monastery/Nexus Development Vivante. "Thanks for forwarding. FYI, I've had multiple conversations with Clyde, both years ago and within the past couple of months, as, quote, word got out," unquote. So the fact is that the developer, through Mr. Stoff, had been trying since 2017 to present its proposal to Madre de la Rosa representatives for a luxury-assisted housing development. And so that development would actually have been consistent with the general plan, with our ordinances as written, and much less impactful to the residents, the city, and the environment. But the monastery refused to even look at their proposal. The developer was told to, quote, "wait until it comes up for bid," unquote, even though the property owner already had an agreement with New Urban West, and so there was no bidding. So although this lower impact assisted housing project had been proposed and should have been included as an alternative project in the environmental impact report, instead they chose to include a huge institutional project as an alternative. Furthermore, on Madre de la Rosa's frequently asked questions on their website, posted after they and the city had the negotiated plan, it stated, quote, "The site is currently zoned institutional, and we continue to evaluate proposals for various institutional uses in case it becomes necessary to pursue this option," unquote. Well, that statement is not true. They were not considering any other proposals. And then it goes on to say, "However, because the institutional proposals we have received appear likely to have a greater negative impact on the serenity we seek for retreatants, We've decided to pursue a single-family home residential development at this time.
Right, yeah, we got that email. Can I just ask you a question? The
Yeah.
only thing I saw in all that stream of email, which was highly edited, it looked like to me, and cherry-picked, there was only one offer that was rejected of $10 million. So, I mean, and it's not even germane other than the fact that if there was some kind of monetary mention, which I didn't hear of, that's the only number I saw other than the claim that they were willing to pay market value. But I mean, that's relative, and so I didn't see any validation that there was any amount that Mr. Stoff made that a claim. And I'm also wondering why he didn't personally, since he owns property in town, why he personally didn't show up here to reiterate all this, because this is all ex parte information that we just got within the last week.
Yeah.
That's why I brought it up, because I saw this and I saw that it was on Facebook and there was other things that I didn't even really want to pay attention to. So,
Oh, I didn't see it on Facebook. I'm the messenger.
Okay, that's
But I
fine.
can say, I think Mr. Stoff isn't here because he works, I think, in Orange County and is here on the weekends. He has a home up here.
yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying that this is so important that we get this at the last minute, like we do many things, and then and these wild claims are made, and we're supposed to interject this into our deliberations, which we're trying to do.
Well,
And
I don't think it's a wild claim per se. I think it's just that Mr.
Sure it is,
Cameron
but
presented that it was
okay.
sort of the first time they had heard it, and it had actually
Right.
been an ongoing discussion for years.
Right, but then why at the 11th hour are we hearing about this? I don't want to account a dialogue, but I just want to
Yeah, I
rebut what I've
understand.
heard. And
Okay.
just because after that, and we got this long this email, it was very bothersome. But that's why I brought it up in the first place, because I wanted to see if there's any basis to the claims, and this doesn't really validate much for me. That's all I can say. But I appreciate you bringing up that information.
Okay, and I'll
Reiterate. We have it. I
I'll
think
relay
everybody's seen it.
I'll relay the message.
Okay, thank you. Is it?
Alex Arietta. I wanted to follow up on two items. One is, I think this is part of the issue, and the reason why it is germane is because since the beginning of this whole initiative or project, there's never been any discussion around viable alternatives. Okay, so that's why it's germane. And even though it does seem to be coming up 11th hour, there has never been any discussion of viable options.
Okay, but this is part of our action item, so I'm going to have you reserve all these because this is all just conjecture. I only
enough.
wanted to address her, and I allowed her the latitude because this had come up in the last minute, but I don't want more comment and running comment and follow-up comment on this one item just because I'm allowing it in this time.
Okay.
This is
I thought
still
that
an
was-
action item.
Okay, so the other item I wanted to talk about was about water, and that's not on the agenda for later. In terms of the water issue, it continues to become more perilous in California, certainly within Los Angeles County. Last time this was discussed, I don't know, 2 months ago. It was asked, I think, by City Council. They asked the city attorney, what's the issue about a water moratorium? And the issue was, last time there was a water moratorium put in place, the water levels were nowhere near as disastrous as they are now. But yet there was a water moratorium put in place in Sierra Madre. So I'm just asking if this can again be looked at by whoever is in charge of water here to take another look at this, because I think it is becoming more serious than it was even a few months ago. And obviously, as it pertains to the city, as it pertains to the project, which we're not going to talk about right now, but there's huge dust control issues that would necessitate the further use of high amounts of water. So I really would encourage the Planning Commission, ask the city staff, take a look at this, probably Jose, city manager, former water head, to take another look at this and come back with a comprehensive report with updated information from the state, with estimations of water use, and then present another updated opinion to this body, Planning Commission as well as City Council. That has not been done. It has not been done in about 9 months, and a lot has changed in 9 months. So I wanted to get that on the radar because it is a very salient issue. Last issue I wanted to talk about in my remaining seconds is around fire. And I'm pleased to see that the city is taking this more seriously at the fire department. Obviously, we are in the fire season now, and it's going to become more and more paramount that this be taken very, very seriously, including future home projects are proposed to be built in very high-risk fire zones. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right. Anyone else here for something not on the agenda tonight?
Good evening, planning commissioners. First, I'd like to thank you folks. You're volunteering, and obviously from the crowd that we have is not what the kind of crowd you're used to. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but when I came in the room and I saw how it was filled, my comments should be for the city council. But the fact that the city council has reduced your members down to 5 from 7, taken your design review powers away and given it to City Hall, which I don't think has the experience that you folks have, I find it very disturbing. And so therefore, and I didn't plan any speech to come up here, but I find it absolutely shameful and sad with the misinformation that's going out there, dividing our community. I have friends in this community that are so afraid of Sacramento and lawsuits because they're chummy with the city council members who are all worried about lawsuits. Everybody is worried about lawsuits. But the fact is, people are voted in as council members to represent the community. And I don't think and don't feel like our community is being represented. I feel like when I come here, I think you folks do a good job of it. You look at all the issues. You don't get involved with the passionate parts of this. But for me, the passion is overwhelming when I see lies, misinformation, out of our city, people coming in talking, corporations, people with a bunch of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on 4-color brochures. That is an example, shows a tree that's 15 or 20 years down the line. The word bribery comes to mind. Now, I know that the city had somebody donate $100,000 for our new fire engine. Don't know where that came from. But there's a lot of money being waived at city council that is just disturbing. It looks like a bribe to me. And the fact that people are so afraid of Sacramento and won't stand up for preserving our community and having our general plans followed, and all the misinformation that goes along with distracting some of the fact is, I just find it emotionally disturbing, and I don't see how some people can go to sleep at night knowing that they have pushed an agenda that isn't with the facts. So my apology for the emotions to show, but it's very disturbing, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out, and we just need to stick with the facts. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the hard work that you folks do.
What was your name?
Gary Hood, North Baldwin.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anyone else? Okay. And we move on to our action item of the evening. Since you have a short presentation?
We
or-
have a PowerPoint presentation this evening.
Okay. Terrific.
So the Planning Commission will be continuing their deliberations from the May 5th public hearing regarding the Meadows of Bailey Canyon specific plan. And at the May 5th hearing, the Commission allocated, in order of priority, the next steps in the review process regarding Phase 1 proceedings. And it is to begin with consideration of the amendment to the general plan and zoning code and subsequent land use map and zoning map, approval of a lot line adjustment, adoption of a specific plan, a development agreement and certification of the final EIR, and adoption of mitigation monitoring and reporting programs. All of these actions will be forwarded for a recommendation to the City Council. And what I wanted to also ask the Commission, as we proceed with review of each of the individual items, I would like to ask the Commission to take a straw poll vote to determine if we are able to support the requested entitlements before proceeding to the next topic. So why don't we go ahead and begin? So all of these items actually are in response, especially once we get to action item C, are in response to commissioner questions from the last meeting. So we're going to go through each one individually. This particular action item A, again, I will be asking for a straw poll vote. The commission wanted to prioritize everything in order, and this is the first item. So you can see the two graphics. They go from left to right. Is the existing land use map designated as institutional, and the proposed designation is institutional and residential low density. The second map on the bottom, the two maps, is the zoning code amendment. Again, the zoning map is currently zoned institutional for this site, and the proposed zoning would be institutional and R1 family residential specific plan overlay. So that would be for looking at creating one parcel into two. Basically, all it's doing is creating the two parcels. On the lower portion, there's actually three parcels that are tied together. So if we have any questions on this, we've looked at this a number of times.
So are each one of these things we're going to vote on, do they get voted on once and then go to city council as a single unit, or we have to go through all phase one and that goes as combined and goes to council?
Yes, we cannot make a recommendation to council on any individual action. This is all collective, and it will go to the council as two separate resolutions.
Okay.
But if I could just add, the idea with the straw polls is to create a way to work through this significant amount of material as we go. So straw polls will provide direction to staff that a piece of it can be marked as done and set on the shelf, but the final action has to be one complete resolution, or rather two complete resolutions, one complete set of actions.
So I have a question. So this is effectively a vote, or is it just how we're feeling now and we can discuss it more?
The latter.
Oh, good, okay.
It's a discussion and guidance tool.
And so are we gonna, like just action item A, are we gonna stop now and deliberate and do a straw poll, or are you gonna do the whole staff presentation and then we're gonna go back to A?
No, I wanted to obtain the straw poll at this point. So you can deliberate on this action, and you can vote on that, and we'll set that aside and go to the next item.
So this presentation may be our agenda for the next number of meetings.
Yes.
Any questions of the other? Because I think we can probably all answer that question. I think the details are going to be as in the devil is.
Right, and I just want to know if and it seems like we're gonna deliberate now on this A, and then we're gonna take a straw poll, then we're gonna move on to B.
That's
Right.
correct.
But the straw poll is not binding.
It is not.
Correct. The final vote will come after we get through each of these items over perhaps one or more meetings.
So it's entirely possible that between now and the end, there may be some additional information that would change our vote.
Yes, that's possible.
So how do you want? Go ahead, Peggy.
I personally have no problem with considering the residential overlay a real possibility. I'm sorry. I have no problem with considering the residential overlay as a real possibility. I heard, there are other possibilities, and some were laid out in the EIR. But it appears from all I've heard that the owner of the property, the Passionists, want residential, and it's kind of the owner's choice. I'm not sure what kind of intrigue went on creating the MOU and all this disturbing information and weird feelings we're getting from the community on both sides. But what I have heard is that the owners of the property wanted to go residential. I think that's been fairly clear. unless I misunderstood something. I don't think they were forced into this, is my understanding, but I'm not even sure of that. Okay?
Okay.
ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with the general concept that I'm okay with transitioning a certain portion of this property on the general plan level from institutional to residential. And whether the monastery decided that because it gets them the most money or because they just like it more, I really think that's up to them. You know, and if I were in their shoes, if I would have done the same thing, that's pretty immaterial. The really germane question is this okay for the town? And I think it is. So I don't have a problem with the general plan amendment moving the southern portion from institutional to residential low density. I do have a problem with the proposed general plan amendment overall, though, because we have three separate parts of this property. And we should be transitioning the southern part to residential low density, leaving the middle part institutional, and changing the upper part to natural open space. We're processing a lot line adjustment. There are 3 parcels on the property now, so this can be easily accomplished. There's no reason not to do it. We're not talking about change of ownership, so the monastery would still own that northern portion, but it would just be, as it should be, designated natural open space, and then when we get to part B, raising ahead a little bit, zoned open space, because that's what the property is good for. So my straw vote on action item A is going to be a conditional vote in favor if it's transitioned to 3 designations as opposed to 2.
This is why I asked the question about one thing influencing another, because the lot line, you bring up what is normally covered, what has been covered in the lot line discussion, the natural open space. And so part of that depends on the city accepting a certain percentage of those 2 upper parcels as natural open space.
Well, to be clear, the 2 parcels above the one that's on our map, one of them is already natural open space.
Right.
And the other one is in the county. And so there's discussion of getting a easement or a restricted covenant over those and putting that into escrow, which I'm in favor of as well, especially the part that's in the county because we don't control. But I think the concept of getting the northern portion of this chunk of property into natural open space is important. And, you know, we're doing the straw poll in this order, but technically in order to change the general plan designation and the zoning, we're going to have the lot line adjustment because we need to create parcels.
And that's why I asked the
that we
question.
can,
Yeah, I agree.
that we can actually designate or change zoning on.
Well, we can,
Yeah, I completely agree, having just had before us an undoing of a doing where it wasn't done right the first time. So I'm very much in favor of making sure that we get this right. And my straw poll is that I do not have an objection to the bottom of the property, the southern part of the property being zoned residential, the middle institutional, and the upper open space.
I agree, and my concern is that I want to know that the city will accept the upper part and come up with a conservation agreement either with the Sierra Madre Conservancy or the, Santa Monica Conservancy or something like that, because I think the end result is that, you're not going to build on it anyway, but I would like to see it. But do we have the authority as the Planning Commission to ask the city to move on that, to have the city accept it under those conditions? Or is that going to come from the city council?
That'll come from the city council. You can make a recommendation to the city council to that effect.
Okay.
But
Oh.
Just to clarify my position, if it's zoned natural open space, designated natural open space and zoned open space, I really don't even feel like we need a conservation easement. I mean, it's sort of belt and suspenders, and I'd like it, but I'm not talking about dedicating the property, the fee interest in the property to the city. That the city has indicated to us they don't want that liability. it's easy for us to talk about that, but we don't look at the budget, so I'm not gonna trample outside my purview. So, no, I'm talking about the monastery maintaining ownership of that property, and they can still use it, they can make trails in it, you know, do all the things you could do under that zoning. It's just they can't build buildings on it or whatnot.
And I will have, towards the end of the presentation today, we'll talk about the development agreement, and we'll address this and show an exhibit to some of this conversation that we're having now.
The other point, if I could add one key point there, to your comments, Commissioner Hutt, I would recommend including at least a conservation easement on top of the zoning for one reason. Sacramento has long shown preference for certain kinds of housing projects. And in other cases, not this one, but in other cases, they have gone after open space zoning. So a conservation easement, however, it has been protected to date, and that's a belt in the suspenders. And the threat is thus external, not internal.
That's good advice, thanks.
Oh, wow. So they have gone up after open, really? Can you give
Yeah,
me-
there, in particular, Senate Bill 9 and Senate Bill 10 both have methods by which open space zoning can be overridden with a certain process. Under state law, and the idea would be to protect against that. Conservation easement creates a contractual property right in the favor of the holder of the conservation easement that would block it and puts it into the contract realm as opposed to purely the zoning realm.
Okay, so the person with the conservation easement has sort of last right of refusal against the state, so they can't just come in and.
Yeah, I should say there's never guarantees, but it gives us a whole second set of tools to use against any push by the state.
Okay, all right.
And so we would recommend to the city council that they pursue the conservation easement.
I think that's staff's recommendation, and then as noted, the budgetary question for whether would be for the council, if the council wanted to look at ownership or conservation. But staff's recommendation, and I'll look at Mr. Gonzalez to confirm, is an easement.
Is a conservation easement, yes.
Okay.
All right. Well, my only comments are that I agree in principle. There's some things we can talk about on the lot line adjustment that I have a little difference of opinion, but you know, what's important to me is public access in the park. So but I don't have any problem with this lower area certainly having a residential overlay, the details of which we will, you know, as part of our job, probably our most important job.
Okay. Moving on, action item B is the lot line adjustment. And what we're looking at is a meets and bounds site survey that describes the property boundaries. And as you can see, the two parcels that creates parcel 1 and parcel 2. And of note, on parcel 2, you see a total of 3 lots, and each of those lots are tied together for tax purposes. So do you have any comments regarding action item B?
Is our only option to accept or reject this proposal?
That is still under your purview. You've had conversations about creating 3 parcels and delineating a portion of the open space parcel as conservation easement. Again, we can look at that would be part of the development agreement and how that's described, but that would impact the lot line adjustment if we move forward with that concept.
Right, and just to clarify, it's not creating 3, because we already have 3 parcels. It's lot line adjustment means you're moving the lines.
Right.
So I would very much be in favor of moving the lines so that we have 3 parcels, which we would later, you know, change to residential, institutional, and open space.
Do we want to talk about the lot line behind the monastery, behind the retreat house?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think that line sort of needs to be where the slope starts coming up. There's sort of a chunk of flattish land on the eastern side, sorry. And I would be fine with that staying institutional. I don't want to get right up against the building or anything like that. It's just the part that's, you know, very, very steep to me is the part that should be in that 3rd parcel.
Would it be helpful at this time to show you that other exhibit?
yes. Yeah, I'd like to see it because I'm a little.
Where'd she go?
I don't want John to have to go with a crayon and start drawing stuff on the thing for me. Secret beach. That's it, okay.
As you can see, this is conversation for the development, and you had a question to the applicant previously to reconsider the open space conservation easement above the retreat center to include language, no habitable structures in development agreement. And they have agreed to do that, to consider an additional deed restriction that would prohibit the construction of habitable structures within the area to the north of the existing retreat center. So you can see on the graphic on the right where they have brought that line further south. It's still the same zone, but that would be the area of the conservation easement.
And they've agreed to that already?
This is their proposal, yes.
Theirs, okay, because last
Now,
time,
what this is not doing is creating that third lot that
Right, yes.
Commissioner
so-
Hutt is talking about.
I mean, a couple comments. One is, I'm not sure a straight line is the right line, but I think that line can be figured out, but
Yeah,
that's sort of the general concept.
Yeah, I think even on the exhibit here, which is a letter from the Sierra Madre Mountains Conservancy, this was sent to you. I think it even represents that. Let's see, there's a comment about it should be shown as a straight line and not following a particular contour.
Right, I mean, but the issue with the Mountains Conservancies, they said they don't want to be the beneficiary of an easement unless the city owns the fee interest, and the city isn't interested in owning the fee interest, so
Right.
it sounds like we don't have a meeting of the minds with regard to the Sierra Madre Mountains Conservancy. So we could have an easement that runs in favor of the city, but I don't see one that works.
Okay, and that line I was searching for was from the standpoint of a conservation management, it needs to be a straight line instead of an undulating line regarding that open space dedication.
Yeah, I think if you, I mean, I appreciate their comment, but if you look at our zoning map, especially when you get into the parts in the hillside, they're not straight lines, right? They follow contours. I would prefer to follow contour, but I think where that line is now is the general vicinity of where it would line up. But again, I appreciate the conservation easement offer, and I think the conservation easement should cover this lot and the other two north of it, and it should be put in escrow and recorded per the development agreement. But I also think it's important that that be created as a separate lot and designated under the general plan as open space. And again, I don't see any reason why not to do that. I don't understand the hesitancy because we're not talking about the city owning it. And we have heard from the monastery that they're concerned with, people potentially using it. But if they own it, they can keep people off, right? So I think we all want the same thing. We want that to be natural open space that has very limited use. And the monastery could very much guard that and make sure they use it as they see fit.
I think when we walked around the property, they talked that they would like to be able to use it in the future for, just the way they use their grounds, the rest of their grounds. And I think in the interest of the city, that they would maintain those grounds and they would be an additional fire barrier. And so, but it would be their property, so it would stay institutional. And the conservation element would start at the base of the hill and move up. So, yeah, that's why I asked the question before, because I don't see that being spelled out.
Tom, how do you feel about it? You gotta-
I think that this one needs more clarity. I agree that it sounds like everybody wants the same thing, and we just haven't found the right way to do it yet. It sounds like letting the monastery having them continue the ownership that they have specifically said they want is the right way to go, and that we should adjust the lot line to make that portion open space.
Yeah.
Peggy?
if the hill is that steep, I just don't understand why we're all that concerned, because it's gonna be very hard to develop anyway. So,
You're ambivalent. It's like, you could go either.
yeah, I just don't see the need, but if you guys wanna work something out, I don't know.
I think that it's commissioners who were on the commission for One Carter and now see the lot that was supposed to be open space maintained by the homeowners association that was sold at tax auction
Right.
and is now on the MLS listed for sale. I would really rather have this
Well, there you
zone
go.
open space.
There's a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I'm sympathetic to is, because I understand exactly, because we were all here for One Carter, is the impression that the Passionists had that people would sort of think it's, because we have a lot of people who would just wander from Bailey Canyon. I don't know how you get there, but it's almost like, well, it's open space, so it's our space.
Well, Bailey Canyon Trail's about 900 feet away from any edge of those two pieces of property, so, and it'd be a rough climb.
Yeah,
And I'm not aware of any trails in that whole, either one of those areas, so.
but how about from the other, through the other easements, above Pasadena, where they can come in? I don't know what the end of those streets look like, but, and I don't know how many people have wandered in or incurred from that, but I thought that was maybe their concern. I'm just a little, I mean, I understand, I agree with your principle, because I don't want to have what happened up at One Carter, have some blind parcel that someone somehow in the future, I'd like to think this out so it doesn't happen. But I also respect what the Passionists had, because I think they see that as the integrity of their project. And just, I also had a conversation, this is not necessarily important, but Search and Rescue was citing out spots to land a helicopter, since they used to use that field.
They still can. There's the baseball field that's there, would be more than support a helicopter.
The baseball field, what do you mean?
There's a baseball field around the Olive Garden where they used to have the Fiesta picnic
Oh.
area.
Yeah, they need clearance, they have a 30 by pad, but they need 100 feet around
they
and all
got it.
that, so, wires, okay. So if that wouldn't preclude them from doing it, then, that allows them the
That's
options.
well below that lot.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, in general, I'm in agreement as long as the Passionists are in agreement, because I sort of understand their principle, but I would like a mechanism so we avoid the One Carter issue that John's bringing up, and
So
his solution's probably better.
I
than
guess my
mine.
question to staff is then how do we resolve this? Do you come back with some kind of wording for all this?
You could, as, one of your directives, ask the applicant to come back with a further refined depiction of what that might look like without a straight line, and include that as part of the lot line adjustment. So that could be one of the directives that we can include and bring that back to you next time.
Because I think that's still an unknown, because one dictates the other.
And the applicant is also here, he can respond to that as well as the monastery.
That's fine. Is someone want to speak, from the applicant want to speak to that, just in general, so we don't have a bundle of items pending?
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, Jonathan Frankel. Nice to see you. Thank you for this opportunity to come back and discuss the Meadows project with you. Our team would be happy to look at this. I think what we'd encourage you to do is include this in your recommendation to the City Council as a condition, if that's what you so choose. I'm not familiar enough with the city's zoning code at this point to make a determination whether the open space zone would permit the type of activities that perhaps Madre de la Rosa would seek to do in the future. For example, if they wish to use the open space area for ministry purposes and build a shrine or a place for prayer or something else, I don't know if that is a permitted use under the city's zoning code. And so at this point, we can't really make a determination as to whether that would preclude the monastery's future use of the property, but certainly it's within your purview to include it as a condition of your recommendation, and we would encourage you to do that.
Okay, I just want to make really clear, go read the zoning code, right? Do the line. I don't want to put this in as a recommendation that's going to get lost somewhere. I want to see the thing. I want to vote on it. I'm going to vote on 3 parcels. I just want to make really clear, okay?
Understood.
Well, actually, is someone from the Passions who spoke on this last time, would they like to say something about this? Or just have a short discussion about their position as it sits? Since I see a new a line there that I didn't see last time.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mike Cunningham, Retreat Center Director at Madre de la Rosa. Our intention here is to try and keep the area behind the retreat center continue to be a continued part of the retained parcel, which is zoned institutional with the restrictions that you've been referring to. That is, we're not going to build, any habitable units right behind, right on the areas that are, unbuildable, basically, the way that they are right now. But we want to retain our property rights in the same way as they had been previously defined in the letter that we responded to the council and the commissioners recently. I think that the intention is that what you want to achieve in terms of restrictions here from a building perspective on that upper land and how we would like to maintain control of that property from a legal perspective, that the end result will end up being the same. So I think that this probably, if that's the intent of the planning commissioners, and if this and our intent is we've moved, we've changed, or we've had a lot of discussions to see how far we can go with this, but we don't really know what the situation is going to be in the next 100 years. We're at our 100th anniversary here at Madre de la Rosa, and we just don't want to put ourselves or our ministry in any type of box that gets us into an unforeseen situation. So trying to maintain control of the property and at the same time putting the necessary restrictions on the area that's essentially unbuildable for the foreseeable future is what we want to do. But behind the property, there's quite possible that we may in the future build, extend the gardens, build shrines or paths or stuff like that. Who knows what the situation is going to look like in 50 years from a construction perspective. So that area behind our property essentially secures our solitude and the operation of the retreat center. And we just we're giving more than 75% of our property from 88 acres that it is right now is going to end up being either with restricted covenants associated with the as a result of the rezoning that we're talking about here this evening, plus the park that we're building. So we really feel, that we have come, a long way in this process in what we're giving to the city and the community as a part of this, and we just really can't go any further. So I think we can get to the same result without the technicalities being done in a way that are not acceptable to the Passionists in Chicago or the local community or the management of the retreat center. We're really just trying to protect the long term here and not do anything here that interferes with the decision-making process that you guys are involved with here for the community.
Okay, thank you. Is that answer?
I gotta say,
Go ahead.
sadly, I'm gonna change my straw vote to no on these 3 items. We're really talking about trying to achieve the same ends. We have experience where the methodology you're talking about did not accomplish those ends. And I, in good conscience, as a citizen of Sierra Madre who's looking out for the city's best interests, want to use a process that achieves the mutual goals that we say we have and that is actually effective. So I can't support the project. I want to support this project. I think there's a lot of really good stuff here. This is a deal breaker for me.
Well, I think I respect your position, Commissioner Hutt, but I think that if the result is the same, then the fact that not using one method versus another is not doesn't seem like a
No, I don't think the
reasonable.
result is the same. That's the point. I think the goals, our stated goals are the same,
Yeah.
but the results are not. And that's my big concern.
I have to respectfully disagree on behalf of the Passionists. And as Jonathan mentioned earlier, you know, if you decide that that should be part of your global recommendation, then you know that's entirely up to the commissioners to do so before this goes to council. Thank you.
Thank you.
What kind of action would move it to be acceptable? What are we looking for as a goal here?
Well, to me, it's, you do the lot line adjustment to keep 3 parcels. You put the hillside part in open space for zoning and land use, general plan land use. Again, not taking the fee from the Passionists. That wouldn't preclude them from doing gardens, from doing trails. Read the zoning, get comfortable with what it says. It says no habitable structures. I don't see how it in any way impinges on what you say you want to do tonight. So I'm really at a loss at the pushback, because we have this stated communal goal. This is the safe way to accomplish it, that we have seen the other way doesn't work. I just don't understand why we wouldn't do that. So I'm
Commissioner Hutt, if the depiction that we're looking at on screen, if that were the line, you said you'd like to see maybe more of a line that follows contour lines. I know there's a bit of a kind of a valley in here, so contours like do that. But would something like this still be what you're envisioning?
Yeah, I mean, the line, you know, we can work the line, right? I'm not super psyched or saying that it can't be straight, it has to be curved. I mean, I've usually seen these to be more curved, but if people really want the straight, I can live with that. It's just the issue that the solely relying on a preservation easement, I don't see that necessarily gets us where we need to be. And I don't understand why, if you retain fee ownership, you don't want to do that. So.
And the area that we're looking at is in very steep, generally Category 4 slopes. So the area that's flatter is immediately adjacent to the monastery, and that's where they would propose possible improvements.
Yeah, and that part would stay institutional.
Mr. City Attorney, do you have comments?
Couple comments. Number one, as noted, the Commissioner Hutt has made a statement regarding your position, which is clear. The Passionists have made the statement regarding their position, which is contrary. The Commission, of course, is the recommending body. You could recommend that council deny the project, subject to that being the condition to flip it. I haven't yet heard clarity as to the other 4 commissioners' thoughts. The majority does control. That might be a point to bear in mind. And the commission could, on the other hand, recommend approval with the recommendation that the approval is conditioned upon the cutting a deal with the Passionists regarding adjusting, either including the open space parcel as a parcel, separate and marked open space as requested by Commissioner Hutt, or the third way, which is what the Passionists have proposed, namely combine the open space conservation easement, which could block anything, habitable structures, with a carve out for the non-habitable religious structures, I'll call it, the shrines, etc. And then add as instead of using the zoning and a conservation easement as your belt and suspenders, use the conservation easement and the development agreement as the belt and suspenders. Development agreements are recorded against title. They control on any future buyer of the land, even if through a tax sale the development agreement does not get wiped out. Although the church doesn't pay taxes anyway, so I would not expect a tax sale because they're tax exempt unless a lot changes at the federal level, which is highly unlikely given the current federal Supreme Court. So that belt and suspenders is also an option, and that would be development agreement terms as proposed by the Passionists here, the additional deed restriction blocking habitable structures upon an appropriately designed line, and then suspenders, conservation easement, which could, as noted, the Conservancy has rejected that. If the city's not the fee owner of land, the passionate aren't willing, as I understand it, to give the land to the city. Thus, the city could hold the conservation easement. And the other option there is a sub-option, would be the development agreement would provide for an irrevocable offer of dedication. The conservation easement is dedicated irrevocably by the Passionists. They could later be picked up. If the city could convince the Conservancy to pick it up, they could later pick it up. The city could pick it up. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy could pick it up. The State Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority could pick it up, or even the federal government through the U.S. Forest Service, which I understand has had some, in other areas, has considered that. So an irrevocable offer of dedication sort of can cut the Gordian knot by shifting in time the dedication up front, irrevocably, again, recorded on title, cannot be undone by a future buyer of any stripe, later acceptance. And in the meantime, the original owner is obligated to follow all the rules of the dedication and not to build anything. And then that'd be the suspenders, and then the belt is the development agreement. So there's a couple of options for the commission, and I think staff, we would look for majority direction.
Okay, I don't understand why the Passionist Fathers would agree to an irrevocable dedication of the fee. I mean, I'm not even asking for that. And the other thing is, if they're gonna dedicate it, it's gonna have to be a separate parcel, because it can't be transferred other than a separate parcel, so you're gonna have to do the lot line adjustment anyhow.
One clarity there, I did not refer to irrevocable dedication of the fee, but rather of a conservation easement.
Well, okay. I guess they've already discussed the conservation easement, so okay.
Is there a way for staff to meet with the parties? Because it doesn't sound like we're that far apart on this. I mean, we have all expressed similar interest that 10 acres be set aside and not built upon. And I believe that's what we all want. What I hear are the commission wanting, and how that looks on paper, because Commissioner Hutt is correct. We've assumed that things would go certain ways in the past, and we have been disappointed. So is it possible that staff could come, because this solves 2 action items on your list?
Right. No, certainly staff can have further communication with the retreat center management as well as city staff.
Because I think we've made our concerns clear, and perhaps on Monday morning something will happen.
Yeah. We could table this item and move on.
Yeah, I think that's the direction we're going. Let's get some kind of agreement, because, yeah, I don't want to dig my heels in. I agree in the principle, but some of the details are over my head in terms of the legality, but I want the same thing. And I think the Passionists do. I think maybe we can work something out before this becomes a deal breaker moving forward. Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly negotiate further.
So we're going to go on to action item C, as we are about to queue that up. And at your meeting on May 5th, the Planning Commission, during deliberations, had identified 8 questions they wanted to get clarification from the applicant. And in addition to that, Commissioner Dallas also offered 12 additional comments preceding that public hearing. Those have also been incorporated into the staff report and the presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Jonathan Frankel, representing New Urban West.
Thanks very much, Director Gonzalez. So I'm going to run through a number of items here. There are actually 20 items on the list that our team worked to address prior to tonight's meeting, starting with building elevations. And so we prepared conceptual elevations for all 4 styles prepared within the Meadow-specific plan. Here is the Spanish elevation. This is the 1-story. Of course, with all these elevations, and I will get to the Craftsman where we provided some additional details with the side and the rear. Of course, at this stage, this is not the design review stage. And so that's why you don't have all 4 sides of every potential style, but we did want to be responsive to the question and make sure that you understood our kind of first draft of the concepts of how the specific plan would be implemented for each style. Again, this is the contemporary Spanish style. This is a one-story elevation with the typical roof and window elements associated with the Spanish style.
The square footage that you list, is that using the Sierra Madre R1, or is that using the specific plan version?
Yeah, we're going to get into a long discussion about the R1 standards, but this utilizes the specific plan standard.
So this is what we're looking at, a specific plan standard.
Correct, Commissioner Spears, that's correct. So 2700 and 2800 here on the contemporary Spanish. Next, this is the one-story modern style. Again, some flat roof elements, other window treatments, material accents associated with a more modern style. This at the same square footage of 2700 to 2800.
So I noticed that the square footage is the same. Is it your intention that no matter what the style of the home, the square footage will be the same? In other words, I can order one of 4 flavors, but they're all going to be 27 to 2,800 square feet?
There will be different plans, and so right now we're anticipating to have between 3 and 4 plans, and those floor plans will all be generally the same square footage. There can be some options, and so for example, we use letters to denote potential changes in the plan, so there may be a plan 3A or 3X, which will maybe have some slight interior modifications or maybe a patio or porch, but generally, Commissioner Spears, they will be the same size. And so you could have a Craftsman Plan 1, that would be a one-story in the 2700 to 28. You could also have a Craftsman Plan 2, as I'll show here. This is a 2-story. This is the modern elevation, but this elevation could be in a Craftsman style or a Spanish style, for example.
So essentially, for our purposes, when we were looking at these buildings, there's going to be 2 sizes in general within 100 square feet of each other, the 2 size buildings, no matter what the design is.
Correct.
Are they going to be 2,700 or 36 or 37, whatever?
Correct. They're within about 1,000 square feet of each other. Correct.
1,000 or 100?
Yeah, about 2,700 to about 3,900 in total on the larger models.
Oh, no, but when you're building a one-story house, your one-story houses are between 27 and 28, and your 2-story houses are 36 to 38.
Correct.
And those are the only 2 size variations in terms of square footage.
That's correct in that particular plan.
Okay, good.
And do we know which lots these are going on, or is that the home buyers pick which one and then it goes on the lot, or how does that work?
So that will be determined during the design review process, where we'll plot each individual lot with an individual plan and a potential style. Home buyers will also have some options as well. So we may decide that we'll plot up Plan 1, for example, but the home buyer will have the option of selecting the exterior facade or the elevation. So they may want a Plan 2 Craftsman or Spanish and so on and so forth.
So that's very helpful. So when you go to grade the pads, you are looking at that pad as being a 1-story or a 2-story, but it's not. They're not interchangeable. In other words, pad A is built for a 1-story house. Pad B is built for a 2-story house, and like that on a different lot on those.
We will identify the locations of the 1-story units.
So
yes.
you'll know before you sell them. In other words, I can't buy lot 22 and say I want a 2-story house on it, and you said, sorry, we didn't grade it for that.
So it's not related to the grading, Commissioner Spears, but we will locate where the 1-stories will be within the plan. So that will be denoted. So if somebody said lot 10, for example, I'm just making this up.
Right.
Lot 10, I want a 2-story, would say, no, that will be a 1-story product on that lot.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. This in the larger unit, this would be Plan 3 unit, a 36 to 3,800 square feet. Again, the 2-story modern front elevation. Again, elements, a lot of variation in texture, in material, and articulation amongst the various portions of the facade.
Sorry, I had a follow-up question on that. It's my understanding that your designation of 1-story versus 2-story won't come as part of the specific plan. That's at the second phase when you bring the tentative track map.
That's correct, Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you.
Okay.
So this is the farmhouse style, very popular style today. Wood accents, shiplap, other sorts of accents. This is obviously a pitched roof in contrast to the Spanish and modern style with flat roofs. But again, large variation in materials, exterior finishes, windows, and other treatments. This is 37 to 39, so slightly larger than the other plan, but generally in the same square footage, bedroom and bathroom count as well. So the craftsman style, obviously very, very, very well represented in Sierra Madre, really excellent style here. And this is one of the larger units, a 2-story unit, 36 to 3,800 square feet. It's that front element, so you see the gabled roof and other sorts of elements there with the windows, really that define the craftsman style, the pillars in the front, entry as well. And I'll flip through here to the rear elevation. And this gives you a sense of the articulation of this rear facade. You see various plane breaks, which means basically just a differential between the areas, and so it creates some visual interest. With the wood siding is here. You also see the use of windows, bringing a lot of natural light, which creates a nice livable experience. Similarly, on both the east and west elevations, this gives you a sense for the side. On the left elevation, again, there use of large windows, lots of natural light, but you get a sense for the architecture on all 4 sides of the structure, and that is true for all of these plans. There will be architectural features on all sides of the plan. We think creating a very visually attractive and aesthetically pleasing experiences for both residents and visitors. Action item number 2, we were asked to describe how the maximum floor area of 4225 in the specific plan was determined. So this is covered in Chapter 3, Section 3.2 of the specific plan, where maximum floor area is defined. And as you know, this differs from the R1 code. It's the sum of all interior horizontal areas of above-grade floors within a dwelling unit that are occupied for livable residential use. This does not include attics, garages, and accessory structures, vents and shafts, etc. So we did provide the apples-to-apples comparison. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, and you'll see the differential between what would be allowed under the R1 and what we're proposing in the specific plan, and we'll walk through that as well. Angle plane measurement. Our architecture team did prepare an angle plane measurement of the 2-story buildings showing the encroachments into the angle plane. And you can see there that's primarily side of the building and eaves and other features of the side of the building. Allowing these encroachments avoids what we call the kind of wedding cake design, where if you're avoiding all encroachments into the angle plane, you're stacking layers on top of each other, but they're getting smaller. So think of it as a tiered wedding cake. As you go up, each tier gets a little bit smaller. This creates a lot of difficulties for construction in that none of the floors are lining up exactly, and so you have a lot of additional beams, joists, and it's rather inefficient to do it that way. So this, we feel, there are some encroachments, but again, with 4-sided architecture, high-quality building materials, a lot of variation amongst the eaves, both height and articulation, we feel very confident that this will provide a very attractive experience, and the design overall will be very high quality.
So these encroachments will also be with the other 3 designs that you're offering?
Yes, Commissioner Spears, there will be encroachments. Obviously, each one will be a little bit different based on the style. A flat roof will encroach in a slightly different way, but we do anticipate encroachments with the other styles as well.
So these encroachments are, I understand that they provide a challenge for construction, but if you were, since you already are going to decide where the 2-story houses are going to be, if you change the level of the pads for the 2-story houses, then you can you can get in underneath some of that encroachments on the plane. Does that make sense?
It does, and certainly you could look at in some of the fine grading adjusting the elevation slightly during final design. Generally speaking, the pads, especially in the terrace, because you're terracing up. Now that we're going east to west, generally those pads are going to be at the same elevation, meaning you're not going to step up within an east to west street. That's not how the grading is proposed. But certainly there are ways during final design that we can look at minimizing impacts on adjacent neighbors here, people living next to one another. I'll also say that, of course, buyers of these homes will be fully aware as they come into the neighborhood, the distance from their neighbors. So very unlike an existing R1 neighborhood, where if you're living in a house zoned R1, you may have an expectation that the owner next door, if it's a certain way, may remain that way. That's not the case for this specific plan, as there's no housing there at all. And so buyers will be fully aware that these houses, there may be encroachments that don't occur other places in town, and they're gonna have that knowledge when making their buying decision.
Well, one of the, we're not in the design review element, but one of the things that kind of stands out by your design is that it's a lot of those three streets are three sets of rows of houses that are pretty uniform and pretty cookie cutter. And by changing at least the level of the pad, you can disrupt some of that continuum and make it a little more interesting, and also provide a little more privacy for the occupants.
Sure, understood.
Is this, are the property line boundaries shown on this angle plane diagram representative of the actual width of the lots? So this is effectively how the house would sit on the lot?
Yes, that's correct.
And so we can, if you take a look at the side yard setback, you can just imagine an equal side yard setback on the other side in the next house.
Correct, 10 and 10. Exactly right.
I have a question. The development, you'll probably build a model house or two, but from there on out, will every house be bought? You pick the property and the buyer picks the house they want to go on it? How is this going to work? Or do you have a plan that you're going to just do these houses here and they pick that house on a property that has that house? Or what's the game plan?
Sure. So we will release the homes in phases typically, and so there'll be a certain number of homes released in each phase. So for example, there may be a phase of 6 or 8 lots. We'll then let the buyers know on lots 1 through 8, these are the homes. It's a Plan 1 Craftsman, it is this certain floor plan, and then they're going to be able to say, I would like to purchase lot 7, which we've determined will include a Plan 3 in the Farmhouse Style, for example. And so it'll be done in phases, and those things will be largely predetermined, and then with lots of options for customization in the interior of the home. And so they'll be able to choose a lot of their finishes later on in the process.
So you're going to orchestrate which house goes next to which house in batches of, let's say, like 6, so you can avoid windows facing
repetition and those design issues. And so with 12 to 16 potential styles, meaning the variations between floor plan and elevation, we can ensure that on each street, because the project, because the total number of homes, we can ensure that we're not repeating the same style on each and every street. That as you go down Street A, for example, that all of the fronts will be varied. And of course, this is something that we will present to you during design review. You will see how all the homes are plotted, which styles are plotted where, and we would welcome your feedback in making any adjustments at that time.
And so you contemplate the design review to be all of them at once or per phase per phase?
All of them at once, Commissioner Hutt.
Okay. And are these designs that you have built in a different development, that we could like look at the ones that are actually already built?
Yes, we'd be happy to provide some samples from other communities that we've done in various styles, and be happy to work with staff and get you some of our previous projects in Los Angeles, Ventura, San Diego counties, where you can look at some of the product.
But I think it would be helpful to understand if those are samples, that we can get an idea of the sort of type of stuff you build, or this is the model that we're going to build here. Like that's two different things, right? And so I want specificity as to which one we're getting.
Sure. Yeah, no two projects are alike, but I think we can give you a good idea of stuff that exists in the built environment that you can go look at and see the quality.
And with regard to the plan that you have now, and you have the different, what do you call them, models, do you have those plotted out now already? On which model is going on which lot?
We don't, no. And so we had some kind of, internal discussion about where that may go, how all those things will plot out. And so we've done some stuff internally, but that's really going to be part of the design review process with you as we go through and think about which plan works in which location, and stylistically how all that works.
Okay.
Okay, seeing nothing further on this, we will move on to item 4. And so this is both Commissioner Dennis and Commissioner Hutt asked for this apples-to-apples comparison as compared to the R1 zone. And so I'll walk through the table in a moment, but the bottom line is what we are requesting in the specific plan is roughly 700 square feet to about 2,600 square feet larger, depending on each lot. And so I'll walk you through the table now. We have our lot number, lot area. Obviously, they're all a little bit different. And then the maximum floor area allowed, column number 3, is the maximum allowable per the existing R1 standard. And so we're using the R1 definition in the entirety of this table. The specific plan definition is not being used, to be clear. So for example, on lot 1, the maximum floor area allowed per the R1 would be 36,6 square feet, 3,606 total square feet allowed. The proposed maximum is a range, and it's based on that the fact that we don't know exactly what plan will be plotted where. And so that's why we presented it as a range, because during design review, if we have a plan 1 or a plan 2 or a plan 3, that would change the maximum. So we can't give you a precise number on each lot, but we can give you a range. So for lot 1, for example, that's 33, about 3,300 to about 4,800. And so you can see here that 4,800 number, that's larger than the maximum in the specific plan. And so again, we're using the R1 definition, which includes garages and other non-habitable structures, non-habitable space. And so the range of difference you see then in the final column is it's about 270 square foot less to about 1,200 square feet more. So at most, on lot 1, we are proposing to exceed the R1 standards by 1,200, roughly 1,200 square feet. And so on and so forth as you go down through the rest of the lots. You can see 2, 3, 9, and 10, and the exceedances, and the range is about between lots 13 and the remainder, 13 and 42, it's approximately 1,000 to 2,600. But this is that apples to apples comparison as compared to the R1.
So at the beginning of this presentation, you showed us some styles. You began with the contemporary Spanish, and the slide said it was 27 to 2,800, but in R1 standards, it's actually 36 to 48?
Well, so we don't know, again, Commissioner Spears, we don't know which plan will be plotted on which lot.
The minimum you say is 33, 36, and I would assume that that's one of your the smaller size house, and that's the two that we've seen in this PowerPoint are from 27 to 2,800 square feet.
Correct.
So what you say is 27 to 2,800 is actually really 33.
Yes, because
they count the garage.
They count the garage on column 3 per the R1 calculation.
Right.
Yes, and porches as well. And so for the smaller units, the range of difference, it'll obviously be on the lower end of that range of difference. So if you're at the 2,700 foot level, you may be on that lower range of difference, but the range shows the total exceedance. If we plotted a plan 1, which is the smaller plan, the exceedance may be, for example, on lot 3, around 700 square feet, and so on and so forth. So that's why we provided a range. We don't know which plan will be on which lot, but we're providing that range, and we're using the R1 calculation. So we're not we are including in this table the garage and all those other things, Commissioner Spears.
All right.
So this just, at your leisure, of course, you could look on every single lot and see what the range of difference is, but this provides that apples to apples comparison that was requested. So item number 6, provide sightline studies from existing residential properties looking north to streets A, B, and C. So here we worked with our civil our civil engineer and our landscape architect to create 7 sections. And this shows an individual standing in their yard and what they will be seeing looking back into the park. But first, in response to Commissioner Dallas's comments and others related to two things: one, privacy, and two, view preservation. Those are the two kind of key objectives here with everything that's going on the southern buffer. So what we've done is we've incorporated two features. One is an 18-foot wide landscaped buffer. And you'll see that there is a fence, and I'll just go to the first section. There's a fence here, and that is in the interior of the park. So if individuals are playing in the park here, there will be a fence here, and then there's an 18-foot buffer, and there's actually a berm here that will rise, go up. This will be a planted area, will fall back down to the existing residence, where most folks have a wall or a fence here on this side. And so you can see the visual that you would get if you're an individual standing in your yard. This is just one particular location, back up into the berm, into the trees. But you're not going to have individuals in the park, because of where the fence is located, entering the buffer area. The buffer will be free will be inaccessible to individuals in the park. So you're not going to have the very understandable concern by an existing resident that someone is walking straight up right onto their property line and looking down into their yard. And both the berm and the fence prevent that from occurring.
Are you going to create the berm and the grading?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Correct. And so this is just, again, one particular address on Sunnyside.
What is the plan for maintaining the area between the fences?
Yeah, so there will be access provided to this area. And this will be part of the overall park maintenance. So this is home on Sunnyside, 523 Sierra Keys. So you can see obviously different conditions based on the existing topography for each of these 7 homeowners. Here, this individual and existing house sits well below the park. So you're going to see, for them, they're going to be looking up into the berm, into the trees. Here, these folks will not be looking down into the rear yard of the existing neighbor. There's similar condition on the other side of the cul-de-sac on Sierra Keys, 513. Again, no visual intrusion by individuals in the park or noticeable change for this individual here as looking, basically into the landscape area. Larger yard, similar. Again, the 18-foot landscape buffer is maintained. This is a larger yard in this area, and so they get a little bit more relief from the park. Very similar, again, 501 Sierra Keys. And as we move through, finally, with 501 Crestvale, which is at the edge of the park, a little bit smaller yard, but again, you can see the berm effect, the privacy fence, the landscape buffer, really working to minimize both privacy intrusions by individuals in the park, but also creating the ability for this individual to enjoy their yard, but also the view. You're going to be able to see above these trees. So these are not intended to be, 50, 60, 70-foot tall trees. The landscape palette that we've selected in this area will be lower lying. It'll be easier for maintenance, to Commissioner Dallas's point, but it also, we totally understand that the need is for a balance between privacy, but as you look up into the distance, you'll still be able to see the mountain view that some of those homeowners enjoy in their yard today.
I really don't see that happening from those sections. The mountains are tall, but how close those people are to those trees, they're not going to see the mountains.
Well, I think the scale makes it a little bit difficult. Of course, it'll vary. The condition varies. And so, but as you step back towards your house, imagine you're at your lot line and you're walking back 20 or 30 feet. As you walk back, certainly you will have views of the mountains. The entirety of your view will not be obstructed. But of course, there will be a buffer there with landscaping and with trees, and you will also see that. So there may be partial obstructions in some cases.
Yeah, I think that, you've got an issue of trying to balance privacy versus view. And I'm very interested to hear tonight, if they're here or in other meetings, those property owners in specific, sort of where they'd like to come out. Because obviously, if you really want privacy, you can just plant a bunch of trees really tall and there you go. But I think people also want views. And to your point, getting that balance right is tough. And it's not my backyard, so I'd really like to hear from those people to get their thoughts on what they feel like the right balance is, and also if they, you know, they like that whole berm concept or what.
If they use drought-tolerant native plants, they're not going to get that high, and it will save a lot on the water. And water, we've heard already tonight, is a concern.
Yeah, I'm questioning the whole logic of the berm, unless it's a sound barrier also. It seems like if you just planted 2 rows of native bushes on each side with a maintenance path space in between, the bushes could grow through the fencing on the park side, and the people in the park won't see the houses, and the people in the houses won't see the park with those bush, but they'd have a much better chance of seeing the mountains if the trees weren't there.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly something that can be evaluated. I think if the desire is just for shrubs along that area, you know, that would certainly be possible and acceptable. I think it really will depend, and it's a difficult balance. I think we're trying to make sure that privacy is maintained, and I would suspect if you asked each homeowner, it's really going to depend on their relative position relative to the park, and you know, it's a very unique condition in each property, and so we may get 7 different opinions. But
yeah, the 18-foot stretch is nice, but I don't think the berm's necessary, and it would be much easier maintenance if there was a clear spot between with bushes on each side, because the only way you'd see that is from the sky, and so that's not a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so number 7, providing the 25 front yard setback, 25-foot front yard setback lots west of Sunnyside. So this is possible, and the trade-off here is that we have now dedicated a 20-foot buffer zone between the rear property line and the adjacent property owner to the west side. So that is a separate legal lot that we created to serve as a buffer. So effectively, the setback is more than double to the west, more than double the existing R1 standard of 15 feet. And so if you want to push the house back an additional 10 feet from the street, that's possible, but you just lose that space in the rear. So we would not be able to maintain that 20-foot buffer. That 20-foot buffer was part of the MOU, and so it was contemplated and it was included. And in our conversations with some of the West Side neighbors, that was something that was desirable to them. But if your direction is that we would like instead to maintain a 25-foot front yard setback, as opposed to providing additional space in the rear and making that more of a standard setback, that is certainly possible. So
What's interesting is that these houses are already about 100 feet apart.
yes, to the west, you're talking. Yes, Commissioner Spears, and I don't have the exhibit now, but yes, in some cases they're actually in excess of 100 feet.
So
some are even closer to 200.
So what we normally ponder in backyard setbacks, because we have an adjacent house immediately in front or immediately behind. And so, you know, another way where you can vary the look of your development is perhaps move that front yards or back, move the plot, move the building pad either a little forward or a little back, so that things don't always line up like it's done with a laser. And that might bring you some variation. Because like I said, you have 100 feet between the one guy's backyard and the other guy's front door.
Sure,
There's
understood.
a grade in the street.
So item number 8, provide a section showing the height and fence line at the HOA boundaries. And so I know this is a little hard to see on screen, but we did that. We cut a section through the entirety, showing the terraces here. So this is the proposed street. Here's the front setback, the proposed structure, obviously, and then you see the slope and the property line where this notation PL is at the bottom of the slope. So the lot line starts here at this PL and goes to the bottom of the slope. That would be Street A. Similarly, Street B, Street C, and the park lot here at the bottom. The view fences that are proposed are 6 feet, maximum of 6 feet high. in these locations, and you can see the proposed street widths as well. So number 9 was a section showing the location, height of the fencing and landscaping at the south property line, and so that was addressed in item number 6, all those sections that we walked through, where the fencing would be, the 6-foot high view fence, as well as the 18-foot landscape buffer, and the berm concept was addressed in that item. Item number 10, so water conserving systems, water conservation obviously very important everywhere in Southern California. And so what we're proposing, the project currently includes gray water systems for sinks and washing machines for all units. Rainwater capture systems are not currently proposed. And we've been working with some of our energy team members, our contractors. So the gray water system on average saves about 100 gallons per unit per day. So it's highly efficient. It actually recycles quite a bit of water. I mean, so you're looking at on an annual basis about 1.5 million gallons of water that are saved as a result of the implementation of the gray water systems for sinks. That's obviously your taps and your toilets, things like that, and your washing machines that can recycle a lot of that water. So there's a really substantial savings in water usage in incorporating these systems.
Why aren't you using the water from the showers and the tubs also?
It's a little bit more complicated to plumb a system in a shower and a tub, and people often use a variety of products, not just hand soap when you're washing your hands, and so it can be more complicated in terms of plumbing, and so we know that we've got a significant savings in what's currently proposed, and so that is what we're comfortable committing to. And so the detail on net zero and the comment related to today's water pricing. And so as we know, there are a number of ways that we will achieve net zero water, which means no additional net demand on the city's existing supply. One of those is the purchase of supplemental water. Again, obviously today, supplemental water would not be available, but it may in the future become available. And should it become available and should the price increase, the development agreement currently includes an escalation provision, which would also obligate us to pay the then existing cost of water. So the cost of the supplemental water, our commitment is not fixed in time. It will escalate as water goes up. That is subject to a maximum aggregate cap. And the cap on our contribution was based on the projected and anticipated total cost of water over the next 5 to 10 year period. So we work closely with staff to say, what does the water district anticipate in terms of rate increases over the same period of time the project will be built? And so that cap is related to what we would expect. But again, that number is not fixed. It will escalate over time as water rates go up. And so we're going to pay the then existing cost of water.
But it will only escalate up to the cap.
Correct. There is a cap. And that sort of certainty is needed on our side to know that it's not a completely unknown or unknowable number. But it's also, again, based on what the water district anticipates for likely rate increases over the same period of time the project will be built. So we feel it's a reasonable assumption. Of course, sitting today, we don't have a crystal ball. You can't predict with certainty what will happen, but it does provide that room to increase up to, again, that cap that's based on the data, the best available data we have.
And why are you not contemplating rainwater capture systems?
It's not something that we've considered, and that doesn't mean that it couldn't be necessarily, but obviously there's additional costs associated with that, and we think that the conservation measures that we've proposed are very substantial. We have absolutely no doubt this will be the most efficient, sustainable project that has been built in Sierra Madre, and so we're very comfortable with the efficiency measures that we proposed.
I think that the sort of weekend warrior rain barrel thing maybe is a maintenance nightmare, and I'm not saying that, but it seems like because you've got these maintained slopes behind each house, you've got a perfect place for a swale where you could soak that in. And I also thought when we did the tour, we talked about having sort of stormwater runoff capture in the park.
That's correct. Yeah, it's a great point that I neglected to include, which is that all the stormwater will be captured and treated and infiltrated. And so, any additional rainwater capture, you're correct, generally we find not only is additional cost, homeowners don't prefer them. They view it as a maintenance hassle. And particularly because all of the water that would otherwise be captured will be infiltrated, right? Will be stored, treated, and infiltrated within the park. And then percolate back into the local aquifer. It'll recharge our local aquifer. That it's just a bit redundant.
Yeah, no, I don't care about a rain barrel for the house, as long as the water from the house is going down to the park and perking in, that's fine. It's just, I was a little confused by this comment, because it seemed like that, it was contemplated that we'd capture that water in the park.
That is correct. It will be captured in the park, absolutely.
Isn't there a drainage system that currently goes from the road, Sunnyside, diagonally across the property to the water tunnel that is underneath Lima?
Correct.
And are you going to interrupt that?
No, we're not proposing to change the existing drainage system or the existing outfall where that is. Basically, the drainage pattern as it is today, where those flows are located, that will remain. We're of course building new facilities, upsizing in order to accommodate the additional volume, but we're not changing the overall watershed hydrology of it, actually where it is, where that outfall.
I think wasn't that put in by the county flood control or whatever, because it dumps into their system?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Just a clarification, I wasn't suggesting rain barrels. You can, under new construction, you can put a cistern in the ground that's plumbed to your irrigation system with new construction. And I think if the water situation continues the way it is in the next 5 or 10 years, we will have that as part of our code, possibly in that time. So I'm just thinking, why not get on board now?
That very well may be. And if it's a building code requirement, obviously we're going to comply with that at the time of construction. Excuse me, I lost my place. 10, so now we're on 11, designate the HOA landscape areas to be maintained by the Public Park Maintenance District. So to be clear, the HOA landscape areas are not proposed to be maintained by the Maintenance District. The Maintenance District will be responsible for maintenance in the park only. The Homeowners Association will be responsible for maintaining those HOA landscape areas. So there's no crossover between the HOA maintaining park facilities or Park Maintenance District maintaining HOA facilities.
But we discussed that at a previous meeting where HOAs are notoriously bad at doing that, and it seems like would be a better structural organization financially to have the maintenance district do the HOA landscaping. I mean, we're at the point where we're just all putting this together still, and so that was the idea.
Understood. Yeah, in our experience, our HOAs have been very successful at maintaining these sorts of slope areas. They are irrigated, drip irrigation, so it's fairly automated. The maintenance district will of course be run by the city. It will be funded by the homeowners, will be run by the city. And for these sorts of areas that are highly visible, we typically like to retain control and make sure that we are able to establish them properly and are able to maintain them properly as the community gets sold out.
How long are you involved in the project after you're sold the last house?
So we'll be involved through the build out and the establishment of the HOA and through the build out of the project, and then of course the homeowners association.
Then the we will be the homeowners association. That's where the concern comes in, and so.
I think if you all think that you're going to do a better job than the city, I'm fine with you maintaining those areas until you're sold out. But I think in the long run, the district would do a better job than the homeowners association. That's certainly been our experience. And it also seems like you've got sort of two adjacent bits that you're maintaining. It just seems like it'd be more efficient to have one entity responsible for the whole thing and just being done with it.
Sure, we'd be happy to look at that. So number 12, 12A, regarding specific number of large trees over 35 feet in height, and then the overall trees. So I'll start with just the overall, and then we'll talk about the percentage that we would expect to be large shade trees along those streets. So firstly, we're proposing 493 trees to be planted throughout the property. So that is about an 80% increase as compared to existing condition. How many trees are on the site today? About 100. And on A, B, and C streets, we've got 190 trees total. And so what we expect based on our palette and in consultation with our landscape architect on A, B, and C street, we would fully expect about 50% of the trees planted in these areas to be large screening trees over 35 feet in height. And so that would be roughly 20 on street A, and so on and so forth. So we're going to look at about 31 on street B and about 24 on street C. Also want to mention that we have, per your recommendation, agreed to install additional shade trees, additional trees along the slopes on the north side of streets A, B, and C, as well as to relocate parking, which I will talk about in our next slide. So again, in response to commission feedback related to the location of the parking, we shifted along A, B, and C streets from parking on the south side of the street to parking on the north side of the street as requested, in addition to increasing the landscape as well. So this results in 24 additional parking spaces throughout the project. We now have a total of 121 public parking spaces throughout the project, and that includes 19 spaces along Carter Avenue and 7 proposed spaces in the proposed parking lot. Item number 13, specific solar panel metrics. So based on the size of the house and roof space, the exact size of the solar system will vary depending on the orientation of the roof and the style. Pitched roofs are different than flat roofs and how much solar you can put on the roof. So it will depend a bit on the style. But what we're proposing right now is a minimum 4.2 kilowatt hour system. And based on the size of the home and what we'd anticipate on average energy use, kilowatt hour usage here in Southern California, we would expect that to generate about 60% of expected energy demand for a typical household. Now, because we're already installing these panels, if a homeowner wanted a larger system, that's an easy upgrade. And so if they were more efficiency minded and they wanted to say, hey, I would rather have 6, 7, 8, whatever system because I use a lot or I want to offset potentially all of my energy bill, they would have the option to do that. Just as of now, the minimum, again, that 4.2 kilowatt hour system, and that we would expect that to generate about 60% of the energy used in the home.
Can they ask for more?
They can. Yes, Commissioner, absolutely. So item number 14, unvented construction, and this is related to fire safety, right? Embers getting into vents. And so the proposed project will incorporate all the fire safety features included in Chapter 7A of the latest building code. And so that includes, of course, defensible space, fuel modification zones, as well as vents, as well as screening and mesh screening on all of your HVAC equipment to ensure that embers do not enter in to the home. So all of those features absolutely will be included. And so we feel confident about fire safety in terms of using the best technology to make sure that in the event of a Santa Ana event that you're not getting embers spreading from unmaintained vegetation and fuels that are now then traversing, finding their way into ductwork. And so all of that will be accounted for.
I read the Chapter 7 that answered my question, but I don't think the embers usually go through the HVAC ductwork. I'm talking about E-vents and crawl space vents, which brings up another question. Will these houses have basements or slab floors, or will they have crawl space?
They will not have basements.
Okay.
This will be, slab on grade construction.
Okay, so that solves the under vent
Correct.
problem.
Correct. Yeah, and with respect to eaves, there's also other requirements with respect to eaves and making sure that embers can't get up into the attic space, into the roof. That absolutely is a concern, and there is additional hardening done on the exterior of the structure.
The problem at Laguna Niguel, that even though there was huge fire breaks, the high winds blew the embers up underneath a lot of building, and they lost very expensive houses, and that's the unvented attics.
That's right. Those baffles generally work, but you're much safer with an unvented construction. And if you look into it, an unvented construction allows for a lot more interesting roof lines inside. I don't know what the construction difference is, but it's something to, as you get into the next phase of actually designing these homes, to consider the unvented roofs.
Understood, absolutely. Okay, item number 15, so showing the lot dimensions and that portion of the lot dedicated to HOA planting areas. And so we showed you the depth of all of these lots, about 103 deep in A, B, and C streets, obviously different on the west side of Sunnyside. And so the dimensions vary as you go down the street, but this depicts the area to the view fence. Again, that 6-foot view fence from the lot line here down into the view fence. And then again, that slope area from the view fence down to the bottom of the lot line that will be maintained by the HOA. Item number 16, cross sections for streets A, B, and C, and the dimension, very similar to the previous graphic, but again, this is A, B, and C. We broke up this section to C, so you could see again the same dimension, about 103 on the top, and then it goes down on the slope. Here's 47, here's 28.5, and 24 along Street C.
Why is Street A narrower than Street B and C?
It's just related to the grading and the physical fit of the project, getting the units. Also, this is a street that's not going to accommodate very much traffic at all at the top. Few units up here, and so there's no through traffic going up in this area of these homeowners, and so felt comfortable in making this a little bit narrower.
It's just if you made them all the same width to match A, you could make B and C lots bigger.
Sure, to narrow the street?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's not a big amount in either direction. It just, I don't see what you're getting by the wider street.
Understood. So last few items, thanks for bearing with me here. Who designs, pays for, and installs the park? That will be us. We will design, construct, and deliver the park to the City of Sierra Madre. Of course, the park design review process will be part of the overall design review in what amenities should be located there, and so there will be a robust conversation around the overall design of the park. City irrigation water. The city will be supplying irrigation water to the park. It's possible that there will be sufficient rainfall that in the detention facility where you could use that for irrigation water. Obviously, in a drought condition, there may not be water there to use for irrigation. And so just like any other public park in the city will be responsible for providing water there, although there will be that vault system that will capture stormwater and could potentially be used in the event that it rains and it's sufficient to achieve that purpose.
I've got a question. The capturing under the park, is that like in those ponds over there where it's supposed to seep into the ground, or is that just waiting to be used?
A cistern as opposed to something that percolates through.
Thank you. Thank you for the good words.
Yes, and so it's both treatment and hydromodification, which means that it slows the water down and prevents it from causing erosion downstream. So we stop it and we detain it, and then you treat it as well. So the system does both things. It stops it and holds it for a period of time, but also allows it to filter through a number of layers of natural media, which is basically soil and other organic material, and it actually cleans the water, and then once it's cleaned, it gets detained, and then slowly, very slowly, there's a very small perforated pipe at the bottom where it very slowly drips out or infiltrates in this case. So we'll go down and we'll just infiltrate back into the local aquifer. 19, explain the difference between a porch and a portico. A portico is a covered entryway that covers only the entrance. A porch isn't necessarily related to the entrance, so it can be somewhere else other than the entrance. A portico is architectural term specifically referring to the entryway.
Yeah, I'm an architect, and I looked at both those words, and I figured they had a specific meaning to you and the specific plan, so I wanted to know what you were.
They do, yes, Commissioner, exactly right. That is how we refer to them, and that is our intent in using them in the specific.
Okay, thank you.
And so Item number 20 suggests that there could be the potential for multifamily housing product in the project. And so, per the direction in the MOU, and the recitals there kind of acknowledge that in the view of the city council, that single-family housing is an ideal product type here. Of course, the Passionists agree with that as well in terms of interference with their use, and so we did not propose any multifamily housing in the project. And with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, Jonathan. So, action item D regarding the development agreement. We had a conversation about this earlier in the presentation. I don't think we need to discuss this any further unless anybody else had any comments that we wanted to add.
About the development agreement?
Yes, well, specific to creation of the conservation easement or creation of a new lot.
Oh, okay, sorry. I definitely have points I want to talk about on the development agreement, but none of those.
And you could discuss it here because this is the discussion regarding the development agreement and essentially the language that was included. Here, the question was to reconsider the open space conservation easement and to include language in the development agreement that no habitable structures would be allowed within that area.
And I'd add that I think we have direction or rough direction to go back and negotiate further on the open space protections.
Right.
Mindful of the comments tonight and the sort of find the middle ground to accomplish the goals between the commission's comments and the Passionists and developers' comments. See what we can come up with.
And we saw this. There was also another question regarding the development agreement and what is the expiration of the development agreement. The agreement indicates that it is less than 7 years to complete the project, and the justification from the applicant as to why they would need 7 additional years is provided here below. The development agreement commences upon execution. Assuming there is no challenges in court, the development agreement is then in effect for 10 years. Staff anticipates the second phase of this project, which would include the tentative track map and the design review permit, to take approximately 2 years. Then the applicant will need to obtain required building permit approvals, create the community facilities district, and apply for building permits, which may take an additional year. That leaves about 7 years to complete the project. Any questions?
Do you think it's going to take 2 years for us to approve the tentative track map?
No. No.
That's great news.
No, but it's gonna take.
Especially for me.
But
Most of that time is gonna be them preparing, because
Okay.
they've got a lot of stuff to prepare before they come to us.
Yeah, that wasn't the way it read, so that's why I was
Okay.
that's why I was
Fair
checking.
So the development agreement indicated that it allotted them up to 2 years to prepare for the next phase. Obviously, the developer will want to fast track as much as possible, so we anticipate that would be much less than 2 years. And actually, item E, certify the environmental impact report. We've talked about that a bit. The overall summary is that the environmental impacts are less than significant or can be mitigated to less than significant for all of the studies, technical studies included in that report. And that does conclude our staff report. Again, really we'll be spending more time as we move through the process regarding mitigation measures and monitoring program specific to the final EIR.
Great, okay. Any last comments or anything? 'Cause
Did we give up on doing the straw polls?
Yeah, are we gonna go back to item C? This
So,
specific plan?
I'll turn it back to you. I'm not sure that we're baked enough on the other items.
Now, we were really looking at general plans and lot line adjustment at that point, specific plan, we knew we're having some more work to do on that. And if you have any additional comments, we'll take them now.
On the specific plan, I'm having a real hard time with the possibility, the legal implication of the specific plan saying that a 4,850 square foot house can be built on every single lot. Because the specific plan becomes a legal document, and this allows that. So unless there is some sort of tempering of this by lot size or, specific number of what size house, I really couldn't go along with this at this point. It's if you look at these square feet, I did some calculations. 76% of these houses could be potentially 2 times what's allowable on any other property in Sierra Madre. All but one of them is 171% potentially over what's allowable. And I get development's expensive and they're giving us a park and all this great stuff and the designs look great, but that seems really egregious with absolutely no tempering to lot size or, total numbers of which size house.
So I think that one of the challenges that I'm having with that particular section as well is my understanding of the process is that we approve the specific plan, and then when it comes back to design review, the state law is now that we have 3 meetings. 5?
5 total for the entire city. So commission and council together is 5, plus any other hearings,
But the
So
city
we get
council
through and
doesn't
city
have-
council gets 2.
typically.
Because I thought the city council doesn't do design review.
They do not.
Unless it was appealed.
And so do we need to reserve enough so that we could do an appeal? I mean,
I think that's where staff's recommendation for 3 at the commission would reserve 2 for appeal if need be. But that only kicks in for phase 2.
Okay, but phase 2 is reviewing 42 houses and lots.
Be a long night.
So historically, the way that we get comfortable with, so let me finish that thought. So we have 3 meetings with which to try to get this to a state where we can recommend it to council. And if we don't, then council's gonna get whatever they get. And
Yeah, I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that front, but unfortunately, yeah, the state has tighter hands and we can't quite do the normal process we're used to. The developer can help us through that to a certain extent by providing clear plans that enable, clear upfront plans that enable focused review. And that's where I think the staff work comes in ahead in working very closely with the developer on ensuring that the plans are baked enough for review, so we don't get half-baked plans that have to go back and back. But yeah, you're right, that hearing limit is gonna narrow some of the depth of the review.
so give me
That's
some rope here.
State law.
So immaculate plans come back to us. Because it's design review, and under the state's new design review, we're not allowed to look at design unless it's against the specific plan. We have no grounds with which to reject it.
Generally speaking, that's correct. If they comply with the standards in the specific plan that are structured to be objective, then it's a check the box. They have to comply with the standards. If they do, it would be difficult to deny it. Not impossible. We'd have to look at the precise situation, but it would be difficult. The specific plan is the opportunity to set the standards. And that's, as we know, not limited to 5 hearings. This is the opportunity to set those standards in precision.
Right. And the specific plan is not specific in where any of the 1-story versus 2-story houses, which is what we generally make our decisions by, right? The way that we get comfortable with large houses is the fact that we understand that the house next to him is a 1-story next to a 2-story, so that the angle plane isn't that big of a deal, or vice versa. And we are specifically not going to have any of that for this process. Is that right?
That's why I think it's up to this commission. If the commission wants greater detail, certainly that can be done. Make that request of the developer at a certain point. The developer will either provide it, or if they refuse, then that's your recommendation to council, and council can force it, or accept the lack of specificity. In the end, it'll be a decision by council.
Absolutely, absolutely understand that. But I just wanted to, I'm having a real challenge understanding how we could, how I could vote for such large houses with no understanding of what they're gonna look like up there.
Yeah, I think that we have a bit of a issue about when and how we review these things. And, you know, I think we talked about before potentially having under the development agreement the right to do the subjective design review that we have under our code, that the applicant could agree to that contractually, even though we couldn't do that under state law. If we don't have that type of ability to do that kind of review, and perhaps an agreement to go beyond the 5 meetings, then I think we really need to have a lot more detail now so we can see what it looks like. And, you know, I asked some questions earlier about, are these the exact models, or they're just sort of the style? I'm really concerned that we're talking about a lot of stuff that we're pushing to the design review, and we're just not going to be able to really have any effective review in our design review. So if we can't do it then, we got to do it now.
I agree, because once we figured out the true sizes of these houses based on Sierra Madre's code, they became very large houses on pads that are even larger than what we're used to, a percentage of the lot. So we're looking at large houses on smaller lots, and not just a little larger, but, you know, up to 2,000-3,000 square feet larger, which is the size of some of our houses. So while I understand that there are parts of Sierra Madre that are built in different times and in different styles with different, the canyon is different than the community above Arno, and then the canyon is different than downtown, and, you know, and so there are areas of town that we understand look different than one another, but these are pretty big houses and crammed together and looking pretty much cookie cutter, and that all of those kind of push back against what we have been trying in the past to mitigate. So, I mean, I believe that there are ways, there's a path forward here in the solutions, but it's not called out for in the specific plan. And by the time we get to design review, we got, you know, a short window to make our influence, and if it's not done, then it's going to be it's not going to be done the way the community, I think, would expect. So I think now is the time for us to dig a little deeper in terms of, you know, tell me how you're going to put this 4,000 square foot house on this lot and take up more of the lot than we have normally, and how are you going to mitigate the concepts of bulk and massing, which are our two, you know, major concerns. Is it possible? I'm all for architects because they are magicians in 3D, but how that's going to work and what is going to be called out for, because I think then it'll be in the specific plan and it'll be in some other documents that then we can go back and reference when we could do design review.
Right.
But right now, we're stuck with some foggy
I think
numbers.
I think the park is a very good ad, and I think that there's this concept in the MOU that allowing bigger houses than would be normal is sort of the quid pro quo for having the park. And I think that I'm fine with that direction that council has given us, although it was the prior council. But I think there's some point where you say, wow,
that's a big house.
Are we really getting the benefit of the bargain, or would we better just, you know, carve up the park into 10 new lots and say, just make it R1? And I think one of the things to think about is I went back and looked at the settlement agreement on One Carter, and you'll remember we allowed bigger sizes on those than code. But we had design review. So we struggled with those larger sizes, but I think we did a decent job in design review and making them fit in, and I invite people in town to drive up there and see the beginnings of them being built. But I think it's important to note that the sizes that are contemplated in this specific plan are larger than One Carter on lots that are smaller.
Right.
So think about that. And then also, to your point, Bob, as currently contemplated, these are all straight streets with all the same setbacks. And so you're gonna get a lot of this picket fence look that One Carter, because of the layout of the land, sort of didn't have that and sort of built some of those issues in. So I have a lot of concerns with the grid pattern here. And in earlier testimony, we talked about how the grid pattern of streets is an established and good concept, and I think that's very true in flatland. But I suggest to you that if you're too steep to have double loaded streets, you're too steep for the grid. And I think it would be a much better use if we could curve some of these streets a little bit, vary some of the setbacks, and then you could get some more interest in modulation in the overall layout as opposed to just trying to solve those through articulation of the plan models. I also think that you could, we've talked about this before, build in a paseo that goes down to the park. I just think the overall, before we even get to the houses, just the layout is pretty standard, and it could be interesting. And you're really on the edge of hillside here, and so you could do a lot of, and I'm not talking about crazy wild meanderings, just a little bit of variation I think would really help.
Just to add on to your point and your point about the curved lines, I keep looking at Jameson Court and Ida Mae Lane, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty large houses there,
Mm-hmm.
pretty close together.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I never realized was that it's that curved street that helps set them apart. So that's a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, once we figured out what these numbers really mean, the size of the houses were a little more breathtaking. I mean, because in the initial one, so okay, well, there's a house that says 2,700 square feet. Yeah, we can do that, but that 2,700 square feet under, the thing on number One Carter is they were able to put, some garages underneath and things like that. And I guess on this thing, because the slope, you could put the garage in from the back underground, and then you'd have plenty of room. But I don't think they want to do that. So, do I think that there are creative solutions to this? Yes, I do. But I don't think that the specific plan calls them out, and therefore, I'm reluctant to put my stamp on the specific plan because it's going to lock us into what's going to happen, down the line. So I would like to see something. I would like to see a little more depth, and in that depth, I would like to see some variation, and I would like to see some understanding of how these big houses on these small lots are going to present themselves, because that's going to be the nature of the community. I'm not really concerned about the interior walls or all the amenities that go inside them. I'm just looking at when you look at this community, it's going to be big.
Yeah, I think just one thing that I do think is a little bit unfair about the comparison that we have here is that you'll remember we have 2 floor area rules under our code. One is for existing lots and one is for new lots. And the new lot one, which they've used, allows smaller building than the existing lots. I think that's maybe a little unfair to judge them by that. So I think it would be helpful in comparing this if you took the standard that we use in section 1721-250 for the existing lots, because it's a little bit bigger, and so it's not going to look as egregiously unfair. The other thing you could do is if you took those 10 lots that could fit into the park and put houses on them, and then took all that square footage and then made an average and put it onto each of these houses. Is that sort of the bargain that you're getting? And then you compare that number to what you're proposing. I'd like to see how that comes out.
I did that math.
Oh,
Whoa.
way ahead of me.
I like the project, but I just have a real hard time with the square footage. I was trying to think, what can I do to make this work in my head? So I took all the lot square footage that's proposed, and I took the park square footage, and I added in the park. It's the park and land buffer with open space. It's another 3.39 acres. And then I kept the 42 lots, which in a real scenario, if we didn't have the park and we didn't have the developer, it would probably be more lots, but kept the 42 lots, which is part of the MOU. And then I used the calculation for the 10% over the 7,500 square feet. And what would be allowed on each lot, maximum, would be 2,780 square feet, which is lower than the lowest possible one here that's proposed. So that didn't even work. I mean, these are big houses that are being proposed. And, you know, maybe if it was a 50-50 mix, it might work, but as it's written, it allows every single lot to have a 4,850 square foot house.
Right, I
Which
think
is
that's
legally kind of irresponsible of us as a planning commission to approve something like that, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that, you know, we're doing a specific plan as opposed to a zoning code that is gonna apply to all sorts of things we don't even know. There's 42 lots, like, we could just put the numbers in. I mean, at a minimum, we should have a standard that's based on the lot area. And the other issue is, you know, I really, again, I don't think we should have the measuring tool be what's in the specific plan now. It should be our R1 standard. So we don't have to have conversion tables. We just use the R1 standard in the specific plan and then put an appropriate limit that's based on that. And I get the whole issue of the porches not being counted. If we want to have, like, you know, 3,000 feet plus 500 for porches, you know, that's fine. Like, I understand how that goes, but I don't want to end up with a 3,500 square foot giant box, right? And so I think that's, I mean, we got to do something like that, to your point, that tailors to the lots, either through a formula or through actual designation at each lot, as opposed to just saying, yeah, they could be 4850.
I want to make clear that I understand this correctly and that the public understands this correctly, because I think I read something by somebody that suggested that the specific plan works alongside our zoning code, our municipal code. It's my understanding that once we approve the specifics in the specific plan, it is the primary code for that property. And anything that's not covered in the specific plan is the only thing that the city code would cover. And so it's not both, it's the specific plan is it.
It's both, but a hierarchy.
Yeah.
The general plan controls first, then the specific plan, then the zoning code for anything not covered by the specific plan. In the event of any conflict, the specific plan controls over the zoning code.
So that's why it's so important to know exactly what's going to be done with water and the metrics for it, and what's going to be done with solar and the metrics for it, what's going to be done with the square footage, and how it's going to be proportioned out. And so this is, you know, our chance to control things we think are important.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to shut this thing down, I just want to make sure it's not something that catches us by surprise.
Well, we would lock ourselves in and tie the city's hands if we didn't.
Yeah.
And that's, and that's why we're here.
Yeah.
So.
You guys want to, can we maybe take a break? 5-10 minutes, so we can come back and we can, because we're sort of stuck on this. But I'm going to take a short break of 10 minutes. Everybody stretch their legs, use the restroom, okay? Sorry about that. Yeah, EOR sitting in there, Bob?
They came the last 3 days.
Oh, my goodness. Good for you. At least you got more exercise than I did, because I was on the bike. That's less stressful. An old Alan Sherman video.
I should skip dealing with the guys at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're never there.
Where am I? Jen, have you been to Chico Hot Springs? Oh, you should go. Yeah, it's beautiful. Nice. "20 miles. Oh, stop talking now. Well, thank you. Welcome back to the Planning Commission. We're gonna continue on. So, go ahead.
Chair, staff has conferred and has a recommendation, if I could, subject, of course, to the commission's discretion, which would be for us to take the comments on the specific plan, particularly the need for specificity as to units, information, lot by lot, size, location, placement, and to take a look at adjusting the site plan to not have the 3 straight streets and make the other adjustments for non-uniform setbacks, et cetera. Take that back, work with the developer, and see if we can come up with a revised site plan and bring that back.
Okay.
That'd be our recommendation at this point, to take those comments, renegotiate, and then return.
So, my question would be, what will your addendum to the specific plan look like, and what will it mean for the specific plan?
So the goal will be to see if we can come up with greater specificity, lot by lot, 42 lots, layout for each of the lots, size, maybe a range, maybe not a precise figure, giving the buyer some flexibility. Height, so it's 1 or 2 story, again, maybe a range, maybe some flexibility. Placement, setbacks, sort of the general parameters, lot by lot, with some asterisk for some flexibility, to try to get that at a greater level of specificity that could then be baked in the specific plan, and then could be, if there's support, recommended on to City Council, subject to what we can convince the developer to accept.
Yeah, I believe that they have enough of a variety of lots that they have more options, but the table that we've been given pretty much assumes that all lots are the same in terms of what they're going to put on them, and so
that'll be one of the key things we'll be asking for them to specify. Is at the moment they've reserved flexibility for all lots to be 1 or 2 story, to have any of the 4 designs, et cetera. I think we're going to ask them to put some hard specificity on that. And push them to give us a precise proposal that will lay out for each of the 42 lots, is it 1 story, 2 story? I think the design could be reserved, the Craftsman or Modern or whatnot, might be a choice for the buyer. They might want to specify that now. See what we can get in terms of greater specificity, bake it as much as we can, and then return. That's our current proposal, rather than continue to hash it out here when we don't have the other party in the conversation, so to speak.
It seems like if we were going to do that, it would be helpful for us to list out whatever other concerns or comments we would have on the specific plan, so that y'all could have that input now instead of waiting till you come back and then and then.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's concerns that we haven't covered, I think that would be great to hear.
Yeah, let's move that direction so we can do that and then not waste time for the next meeting. We'll have something to work with. Because I know everybody worked on it.
Okay.
I have a question that came up during the discussion of the rain capture system and how it would be included in the project if it became part of the code. I know the code gets frozen for projects at a certain level once, they start into development. At what point would things like that be frozen out? At what point in the project?
As proposed here, it'd be frozen out upon the execution of the development agreement. That would freeze out things like that. Not the state building code, but would freeze out the city's code.
The city's code, but the state would override a specific plan.
Right, the state building code always controls, but I don't expect the state building code will ever require rainwater capture.
Oh, okay.
At least not in our lifetimes.
Interesting. I
Well,
beg to differ.
Say again?
I beg to differ, but.
Fair, and that's my
Yeah, okay.
considered professional opinion based on who has power in Sacramento. It is not the folks who are focused on water conservation.
Okay.
It is the other side of that table.
Interesting.
So I wouldn't, if that is the goal, that could be a recommendation to the council either to bake it into this development agreement or to look at it as a broader code change applicable to everything. But I wouldn't rely on the state to do that.
Okay, but if it was part of the city code, it wouldn't matter because the specific plan would take precedence.
Right, so the vehicle to do it would be to add it as a condition here in this development agreement.
Okay,
Mindful that the developer has already rejected it, the commission could still recommend the council make it a condition, and then council will then choose to accept it or reject it. If they accept it, the developer will then face their choice.
okay.
I think, as far as the water capture, to me, I think if we have a good mechanism for infiltrating into the park, especially if it's a sort of neighborhood-wide, that probably is going to be more maintained better than if there's, individual rain barrels on each. I mean, people can always buy rain barrels if they
No,
want.
I'm
right,
not talking about rain barrels, I'm talking about hardwired systems that
Right.
are underground and into the irrigation.
Yeah, and so I'd like to see how the capture works in the park. I guess I'd like to get more information on how that works. Another thing just to say some other issues, we talked about the way the area is measured. That we'd like to see that measured by R1. On the angle plane, I'd like to understand if there are some lots that are going to comply with angle plane and some that are not, so we could be clear on that. To me, I don't think it's fundamental that every single lot does, because I think you could get sort of that, then you get a repetition issue that maybe is worse than not having it at all, but having it on some would probably be helpful. For me, the 25-foot setback west of Sunnyside is not a huge issue. I don't know if other commissioners feel that way.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I agree.
I do think, though, that if instead of having a straight 15 or a straight 25, if we had some variation, that might be preferable. I think that the widening of Carter is a mitigation measure that we talked about on the EIR, which is very important for safety. But there's also this concept of combining the north-south part of Carter with the access road. To me, I don't think we can say that's a required mitigant for environmental issues. But I do think if you could do it, you could, shrink that down and then maybe have more room and maybe make the lots a little bigger. I was gonna say I'd like to see parking on the north side of the streets because you get more parking, but you already did that, so thank you. In the park itself, especially now that we have more parking on the streets, I would like to see only handicap parking and loading. Because I think the problem you have is if you have actual parking in the park, number one, you take away park. And number two, people fight over that lot instead of just going up all of 100 feet and parking somewhere else. I think it would be great if we could have a pedestrian gate at the end of Crestvale going into the park with a code for residents, so that it's not, people at large don't use Crestvale as a parking lot, but the people who live on Crestvale don't have to drive to a park that they can see, yeah. And then also we talked about the slope areas, I think would be better maintained by the district rather than the HOA. But if the developer would like to maintain those until such time as it turns over the control of the HOA, I'm fine with that.
That's in the development agreement, I think, so when we get to the development agreement, be sure and say that again.
Yep.
So to the idea of aligning on R1, height of the finished floor is not consistent with R1, and so that should be adjusted. Go back through my notes as we're doing this, so if somebody else has something to jump in, go ahead.
I would like to see the R1 standards used on all drawings and measurements. once we figured out the difference between what's in the specific plan and what we're used to, that was a wake-up for me on this. It changed my vision of the whole thing. It really brought out the fact that even though the pad is 10% larger for the size of the lot, it's still going to be a really big building. So I think our general concern is going to be with bulk and massing and the proximity of the buildings to one another. And whatever they can do to mitigate that, either by moving them forward or backwards or up or down on the plane, and then making them perhaps a little smaller, will go a long way. I'm impressed with Commissioner Dallas's paperwork and math on that, and that, you know, is a pretty impressive point of reference. I like the idea of the concept that Commissioner Hutt put forward, in that if they can capture the street that is now used as an access road to the flood control basin, that moves a lot of those lots over, I don't know, 50, 60 feet. And if you divide that out by all the other, you know, if you, on those 3 streets, that'll make a big difference in the appearance of that whole development. I will say again that, you know, certain sections of Sierra Madre each has its own look and feel. The canyon is different than, you know, downtown area, and different than what's up above Arno. And so do I expect the specific plan to deal with this little community and have that community be different than some of the other parts of town? Yeah, I do expect that. But I think there's a limit to how much difference that we'd be willing to swallow. And you know, the history of this commission has been to not support mansionization and to have houses that are reasonable size for the lot. So we'll have to figure out what that reasonable size is. The water capture, I agree. I mean, even in my little work on the post office landscaping project, I'm learning more and more about water capture and swales and ways of water coming off of air conditioners and other things like that, and out of gray water to being used in a passive manner to irrigate the ground around the building. And so I don't think that's a stretch, and the developer wants to push forward a, you know, net zero water. I think this is an easy way to continue that. I'm impressed with his 1 million gallons a year figure, and I think that we've heard from the community that they are concerned about water, so here's an opportunity to cash in on that. And I believe that homeowners in the future will want to be more responsive and have that. So I think whatever they can do to anticipate future codes and things like that about, you know, what's going to happen with water and how water is used on a property and in terms of the building, I think they can address that and be on the cutting edge, and it would be a selling point. So I'm okay with that. But how they figure out how big the houses are and how they are placed on the lots is going to be the challenge for me.
Don, did you get back to your thought?
I guess on figure 4-9 of the specific plan, the legend contemplates power poles, and I thought that we were undergrounding all utilities. So I don't think I see any on here, but just for the sake of clarification, I'd love to ensure that there are no above ground utilities contemplated.
think they got the note. Anything else?
I think that is a tremendous start from where I'm.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I'm good. I mean, the park's obviously very important for me. I would like to see them incorporate, the things you talked about, but in terms of changing the site plan, sacrificing the park or some variation for me would be less than desirable. So I hope that becomes doable. That's my only input for everything else that you said. Otherwise, it's very good.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
may. Thanks very much. So I really appreciate all the discussion, and I think that we've heard a lot of really good and thoughtful feedback from you, and we want to thank you for that. Stepping back, the specific plan, the reason that we did the specific plan and the reason the MOU contemplated exceedance of R1 standards and all these things is because the specific plan is essential to implementing the MOU, to providing the community benefits, the park, the net zero water, several $1 million in development fees, conservation, road improvements, amongst other things. And so we discussed, and we certainly understand the concern about the size of the home. However, this is very intentionally not an R1 project. We're not proposing an R1 project. Where we will not be modifying the specific plan to make it an R1 project. That's not going to be possible for us to deliver the community amenities and execute the MOU as is currently drafted. And so, however, what we would be willing to do is to reduce the size of the homes, the maximum, understanding that 42, as currently proposed, 4250 is too large, and we understand that. What we could accept is be willing to go down to 3775. That's a reduction of 450 square feet. We think that makes a meaningful difference in the bulk and mass. We also think that that still allows us the flexibility to provide patio spaces, outdoor living, and the other additional square footage that we know buyers are seeking as a result of working from home, living at home, your house being your school and your place of worship, and all the other things related to COVID. So we would be willing to reduce the maximum lot area. However, it does feel like there is a lot of difficulty amongst the commissioners with the concept of a specific plan. There's been a lot of comments, tonight about the desire for an R1 project and R1 standards. And so we just wanted to be clear that that will not be possible for this project. And so what we very respectfully request is we have a lot of feedback related to slope areas being maintained by the potential future landscape maintenance district, things like pedestrian gates and no parking, and all of those things are absolutely appropriate parts of your recommendation. And so we would expect you to include things, and I don't want to assume anything. If you were comfortable with the specific plan, with the reduction to 3775, and, for example, parking removed from the park, and, for example, some other sort of addressing, perhaps looking at the combining of the access road, or a pedestrian gate, or reductions in height, or any of the other items that you'd mentioned. But what I don't want to do is waste your time. Because the project that we've proposed is what we are proposing. So we cannot redesign the project. We cannot, and we are not open to going on a lot by lot basis and developing individual development standards. And so we know that that may cause some discomfort with the specific plan, and we respect your judgment and opinion on it. So we would respectfully request a recommendation, if it's a conditional recommendation, on the following 10 things being evaluated in that proposal that is ultimately brought to the City Council. We will go ahead and evaluate them. And to the extent feasible, we will absolutely include them, and we appreciate your feedback. But what I don't want to do is to provide any sort of expectation that we can redesign the project, because the project as designed is essential for our ability to provide the amenities to make it economically feasible for us and for our partners. And so with that, again, we respectfully request a recommendation on the project. If that is a recommendation subject to a number of conditions, that of course is in your discretion. However, we do wish to advance the project, and that is what we would request of you this evening.
Go ahead, Peggy, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I want to make it clear. We're not asking you to turn this into an R1 project, but we do want to understand the calculations using the R1 methodologies of square footage and things like that. So at least we have an apples to apples comparison of the difference. We don't have to think, okay, so for instance, right now, you just said you could reduce the house to 3750, I think you said?
3775 is
75,
acceptable
okay.
to us.
And
Does that
the fir-
include the garage? See,
Yes,
people
so that
wanna
is
ask
based-
These questions.
Wait,
Correct,
what
yeah,
kind
and
of
so
number is that? Is
Just
that-
to be clear, we are not proposing to modify the definitions in the specific plan.
You're not going to change the definitions of square footage?
Correct.
Why, I'm just curious, why is that so hard? Is
Um,
it,
So what we're proposing allows us to implement the community amenities, the park, and the other things. And so we understand that there are other ways to do it, and there could be other proposals, and we appreciate that there may be difference of opinion. But what we're proposing in the specific plan works for the project. It's what's being proposed. And so we would respectfully request a recommendation on what we've brought forth.
we're not asking you specifically to change necessarily the square footage. We just want to know when you say a 3,775 square foot house,
So,
that it would be the same the way we think of a 3,775 square foot house. We don't have to keep changing, from R1 terminology to specific plan terminology. It's sort of like hearing something in Spanish and having to translate it to English with every single thing. It's
we've
very
spent a lot of
convenient.
time trying to standardize what we've envisioned in terms of houses. And long before you got here, we worked with our staff so that a 3,500 square foot house in any part of the city is the same size. Where now you're coming along and says, oh, we're going to put up a 3,500 square foot house, but it's really going to be closer to 4,000 square feet. And that's going to be, well, that's not a 3,500 square foot house. So all we're asking for you to do is call it the way, is to describe it in the terms that the citizens of Sierra Madre have learned to understand. And I realize that the county counts things one way, but in Sierra Madre, this is the way we do it, so that we can all come to a consensus as to what we all agree on. And I think you've noticed that this planning commission tries to work together and find common ground, and one of the ways it does that is that we all try to agree on what's a 3,500 square foot house. And you with a 3-car garage, now it becomes closer to a 4,000 square foot house, and that's not what one person thinks of as the other. So we are asking for that, which we don't think that's math. That's not an unreasonable request. We haven't asked you to change too much in terms of what you construct, but at least put you on the same sheet of music as everyone else. And then, once we've established that, then we have a sense that, how big is this house? You're asking that the pad be 10% larger than, what we normally do. That may be, if it's on the right size lot, that's not a big ask. But if it's on a smaller lot, then maybe it is a bigger ask. And so we have to sit there and think about all those issues. The bottom line for me is that the houses look a little big and the lots look a little small. Now, is that going to be the nature of the neighborhood? And if that is, then what's this neighborhood going to look like, and what can we do to mitigate, that appearance? Because that's not really what Sierra Madre tries to look like. So, yeah, we're going to maybe ask you to modify. I'm very happy to hear that you're willing to say, hey, you know what, we can do a 3,700 square foot house. Okay, cool. You get a lot of credit for proposing, the modification. And after we look at that, that may be, we may be a lot closer to what we want to do. But the question is still going to be, well, what does that look like? Especially for angle plane. Does that mean that the house is going to fit inside the angle plane? That's progress. So the history of this commission has been to go back and forth a few times and find out, well, these are our issues, what can we do? And now we know, because the specific plan locks us in, we would like to do that negotiation now before we have the 5 meeting minimum, down the line. So to us, the specific plan looks like a pretty binding contract, and that it's going to preclude our ability to have problems in the future. So, we're going to have to live with whatever it is. So we would like to do a good job now, which is why we're proposing that. So it's not as if we're telling you that, no, you can't build any houses, but we want to know more about the houses that you want to build. And you get a lot of credit for saying, hey, yeah, we can put a gate here, we can do this and this. Fine, we're very grateful for that. But we still, at the end of the day, you're going to build a bunch of houses, and our concern is how big are they going to be and what are they going to look like? So we have no problem with your designs, and we have just more, bulk and massing.
Sure, yeah, all those extremely thoughtful and very relevant points and well taken. I think all that we're requesting is that whatever those modifications that you want to see, that you make them in a recommendation.
Okay.
And so if the modification is, and so we provided a table that showed you, call it 3775 plus roughly 400, right? You include the garage. So I think, that's relatively, easy to understand what it would be under R1, but what we are proposing is different. And so we understand there'll be differences of opinion and totally respect your concerns. And so want to be very mindful of all those things. But what I think all we're asking is that whatever those things that you would like us would condition this project. For example, Commissioner Spears, if it is, I would be willing to support this if the house wasn't greater than 35, 37, whatever your number is based on R1, we totally respect and appreciate that. And I think all we're asking for is that those conditions be made in a recommendation so we can advance the project. And so whatever those things are that you're interested in seeing, we're happy to evaluate them, but we would respectfully request that they be included in a recommendation.
I'm a little confused. We made recommendations tonight. I'm not clear what you're asking from us, because I thought we just made a whole bunch of recommendations that you can take and incorporate into the plan and bring a revised plan back.
We are requesting, again, respectfully, a recommendation on the resolutions that are presented before you. And if it's a recommendation of support with conditions or some other recommendation based on the information that you have in front of you. So if the recommendation is approval of the project subject to a lot area maximum of X and different design standards or whatever it is that we've seen a number of them. But what we're asking for is that's included in a formal recommendation of this body to the city council.
So I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying you're not willing to amend the specific plan?
No, that's not at all what we're saying. We're saying we would like to advance the project. That's important. And that we need a recommendation in order to do that. And so we appreciate the feedback that you've been giving us. And I do think there will be things that we absolutely will evaluate every one of your conditions, and then ultimately we'll present those to the city council, and they, as the final decision maker, will make their decision. And so all we're asking for is to be able to advance with your feedback and your recommendation, subject to whatever conditions you feel is appropriate.
Do I hear you say you want us to vote on the whole project tonight?
If I could jump in, that is exactly what the developer's asking for. And I think I heard the commission fairly clearly that they're not at that stage.
Yeah, no.
Staff's recommendation would be for us to work with the developer, implementing the 3775 square footage limit that has been proposed, understanding what that means, making necessary adjustments to the specific plan, and then seeing what we can get in terms of further specificity, whether it's lot by lot or area by area, and then come back to this commission. I have heard the commission, and I think it might behoove the commission to state to the developer plainly that there will be no final vote tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm totally not prepared to vote tonight. I did not review the development agreement. I got a lot of stuff on the EIR. My understanding was that we were in straw vote land and we're moving through the different components. The other thing is, if we send as is with a laundry list of changes that we think need to be made to the city council is going to say, why did you guys do half a job? We want a project that we can review and approve. It's our job to get this plan in the right shape. That's not the city council's job.
Yeah, it's true, that's true. That's how we normally operate. We have a sort of a meeting in the minds, we go back and forth. And so we'll usually present to the city council, unless they completely disagree with us, is a finished project with the recommendations that have been agreed upon, and that they know that they're not gonna be having to do the same process with you at the city council level. But what I hear you saying is that's what you want us to do, is give us a laundry list and just move it along. That's sort of that's somewhat of what I hear. Is that more correct?
We would like to advance the project to the city council.
Yeah.
Yes, subject to whatever recommendations you would like to make. And I understand that some members of the commission are not in favor of doing that, and I respect that, and I understand. But what we are respectfully requesting is a recommendation, the opportunity to present the project as modified, as conditioned by you to the city council, and that is our request.
Go ahead, Peggy.
I have to say that this makes me really uncomfortable, because what I'm hearing is you want us to basically vote down the project so you can take it to the city council, where you must feel like you've got reasonable assurances that they'll pass it anyway. And it just goes to the whole unsettling sort of mood of this whole project from the MOU on. It's a very uncomfortable feeling, something I've never felt on any other project here in town. And we talk about maintaining the character of Sierra Madre, the small town character, and we have to keep it looking the same. But it's not how the town looks. It's not the sizes of the houses that makes it a small town. It's how everybody treats each other that makes it a small town. And I have to tell you, this project has been just really creepy as far as people feeling cheated and not getting the correct information and lies going back and forth. It's not small town that everybody wants to keep. And for that reason alone, I mean, I love the project, so many things about it, but for that reason alone, I've got all kinds of trepidations going forward with this project, because it feels so bad, just what's been going on in the community. People haven't been respecting each other, and it's okay, so
Yeah.
the idea of forcing this project makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand their point of view too. They want us to move along in one way or the other. We've had that before. We've had people that just say, nope, this is what I want to do, up or down, and move it forward. And we've had a couple projects go to this, city council, and they've overruled us.
And as I understand it, it's the applicant's right to ask for that vote. Is that right?
They have the right to ask for the vote. The commission need not give it to them. Not at this stage. Eventually, yes, not tonight.
Okay.
You can move it forward without a vote tonight, and by move it forward, I mean move it forward back to staff to further negotiate, then to return to the commission. At some point, we are required to give them a decision, but that's not tonight.
All right.
Okay.
Maybe let the desk, go ahead.
So should we talk about the other things that we wanted to get more clarification on, and
In the specific plan?
either the specific plan or anything else? I mean, how much information, what else were we planning on tackling tonight?
Didn't think we were gonna move much past that.
We were gonna do phase one, we were gonna go down the laundry list of phase one and take straw votes was the goal for tonight, as I remember.
That was the original goal, but I think it's been modified slightly to reflect the fact that there's not sufficient consensus with these modifications of the specific plan it doesn't make sense to take a straw vote on the last two pieces, because we aren't there yet.
And we seem to, the request is for information, is that we haven't decided for or against the project at all, we just want more information and the other thing we want is assurance that whatever the information that we request be put into the specific plan in some format so that we can refer back to it later on when we have to do design review, et cetera.
Yes, I think that's been understood, subject to what we can negotiate, and then this commission could accept or reject or recommend approval with modifications, is to the best we can get with a modified specific plan.
Yeah,
If I could make a suggestion with respect, I think the next steps would be any further questions or comments on things that should come back in that renegotiation. And then, of course, I believe the goal was to take public comment, if any.
Yes, yeah, I want to leave us a little bit of time for people who have waited all this time to say something. The whole point was so that they could hear this discussion if they wanted to, who's going to modify what they're going to say or their other input to help us as well.
So, when I looked at phase one, wasn't the EIR also on it?
Yes, it is.
Do you want to do a straw vote on that as well?
No, I don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
That was not the intention even to consider that tonight.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I didn't really have that on my.
Do you need some motion from us about turning it back to staff and having staff come back to us at a date uncertain with specificity?
I had some other points.
Yeah, I had a couple other points too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we were gonna have a few more points and then take public comment before we do any motion. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Regarding the sizes of the houses, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to, start into the tentative track plan and locate houses and sizes, but just to get some percentage of 1 story versus 2 stories, or this square footage versus that square footage. So we get at least a total guarantee of the amount of square footage to be built, planned to be built, and not this, maximum possible on each one. Just, a proportion would be helpful.
I don't fully agree with what you just said. My challenge is understanding when we have historically approved large houses, it's because we understood how they would fit together. The Jenga, the Lego piece, however you want to describe it, of how the size of the house works together. And so I would like to see this is going to be a 1-story versus this is going to be a 2-story or something of that nature, so that we have a little better understanding of that.
Okay, but this isn't going to be like, as the applicant said, an R1 neighborhood, a normal one where we have existing houses and we're doing infill. They have the ability to place houses next to each other. And because they want to sell the houses, I presume they will avoid uncomfortable situations. Because, things that are too close or windows looking at each other do not help them sell a house.
Well, yeah, and I understand that, and I understand that the buyer is going to come into this neighborhood and it's going to be a new neighborhood. It will never look like anything else. I also know that one of our tasks is to make sure that it fits in with the community that it surrounds. And by having oversized houses that are super close to each other, that does not fit within the feel of our community. And so understanding how we mitigate that, I mean, they've got a minimal setback from the street, and they've got a hard break on the back, so there's not a lot of wiggle room. This is gonna look like a downtown area where everything is on the sidewalk, right? So I know that's a gross exaggeration. I'm just saying that there's not a lot of room with a house this size to offset on a straight street where it starts and where it ends. And so by designating where there's going to be the smaller houses versus the larger, I think that you can get a better sense of that.
It's still going to look like 2 rows of houses from down below until the trees grow in, which will be
Okay.
a decade or 2.
We have different criteria we'll use then. So on the development agreement, I had some comments. Pull it up. So we addressed one of my questions about the 24 months earlier. Find the development agreement, I'm sorry. What page does the development agreement start on?
48?
28?
48.
48, thank you. So 4C1, that's when they start the park. I assume that the developer that has to provide the mechanism for funding that maintenance, that during that time leading up to there, because the park won't have been turned over, that there's not a need for any of that ongoing funding? Is that a safe assumption?
Yes.
Okay. On the water saving measures, I believe I heard previously, and I just want to validate, this is section 4D Roman 3C, which allows the city council to convert the funds. That can be executed at any time.
Yes, with the caveat that we would have to provide a reasonable opportunity for the first two programs to succeed. So D1 Romanet 3A allows for purchase of supplemental water. D1 4D Romanet 3B allows for a lawn replacement program, and then if neither of those are successful, then the city gets the option. So it's not a hard time limit, but we'd have to at least provide a reasonable opportunity for the first two.
Okay. Let's see, 7. So, 7A provides for a 10-year term. The first 2 years are contemplated as being part of design review, the track plan, all of the prep work and the planning. That leaves 8 years under this current agreement to build 42 homes. I think I heard that you were going to build them in tranches of 12. So that's 2 years for a set of 12 houses to be built. Is that kind of the timing that you're looking at?
So Commissioner, the exact number of units within each phase is variable. So, a phase could be 3 or 4 or smaller or perhaps larger. It depends on a number of market conditions.
Do you have just a general idea of how long it takes to complete a phase of houses?
So generally speaking, we would think that construction here would be about 2.5 to 3.5 years overall. Obviously, we have every incentive to complete construction and sell homes as quickly as possible, and that fully is our intention. The duration of the development agreement is important to secure financing and for our capital partners in providing certainty to them, to understanding that the rules are not potentially subject to change. And so we would request, and that is why we've negotiated a 10-year term with staff, and so we would request that the term remain 10 years.
Okay. In section 7B, the requested extension is currently contemplated to be granted by the city manager. That seems foolish to me, that something as large as an agreement for this size of a project wouldn't go before the city council. So
That's a straight business choice. The commission could recommend to the council that that be adjusted to be council rather than manager. I think staff doesn't have a strong objection to it. We drafted it as such to reflect the realities that extension should typically be granted only in case of good cause, which in this context would be market conditions. If there's a recession in between phases, it would make sense to grant additional time in order to accomplish the other goals. But I think we have no objection to adjusting that to be council,
yeah,
as council would decide.
that would be my recommendation. Similarly, in 8B Romanet 1, the minor modifications have to do with the date of performance. which would then, again, come back to the city manager rather than the city council. And in Romanet 2, minor modifications of attachments B, C, and D are contemplated as minor modifications, but those are all things that we have to recommend to the city council to approve. So those are like they're not even listed here as what they are, but when I double checked, they're at the back of the document. They're all things that we're being asked to review and then push to city council for approval. So I don't fully understand why we would have minor modifications in there.
The typical reason we see minor modifications in a development agreement is to allow reasonable changes to be made as operational conditions arise that make sense without having to go through the necessity of formal approval by the city council, which requires public hearing, notice, etc. Staff would recommend maintaining that as an option, but if the commission wants to tighten the allowance for what is or is not minor, that could be done. As an example, some development agreements will often provide that a minor modification is something that changes an element of the project that was not specifically discussed by the commission, that does not flip into an environmental impact from significant to not, and that would not modify a mitigation measure in the EIR, for example.
Yeah. So attachment A is actually the lot line. So I didn't think that could be changed ministerially.
If the council approved it through development agreement, it could.
Okay. And the parcel map is exhibit B. Again, you're saying that that would override that?
Again, if the council approved this authority, delegating that authority to the manager, they could. And the caveat there is it is minor modifications, so there's some, not entire modifications.
Yeah, designated solely in the opinion of the city manager.
That's correct. And it would be the council choosing to delegate that authority or not.
Okay. I'll reserve further comment on that. In section 13A, Romanet 6, it includes shortage of product, I believe is. Where did that go?
Can you say that section number again?
Yes, it is 13A, Romanet 6. Sorry, I'm pulling it up as. So shortages of materials or supplies are considered a permitted delay. I would assume that over an 8-year period, products are going to change and shortages are going to occur. And it seems like we would need to quantify that much better than the way that it's currently phrased. Because that just feels like an easy way to get a permitted delay.
We can take a look at that.
Those were my comments on that. And the comments, that's all the comments I had.
Okay, great. Anything else? I wanted to leave time for the public to comment so we could make a motion. Good? Okay. All right, so anybody, this is the time, if you can speak shorter so we can have more people talk, I'd appreciate it, but this is the time I'm going to let the public come up and speak now, and then we'll make a motion at the end of the, around 11 o'clock.
Good evening, Commissioners. Deb Sheridan, Valley Vista Drive. And I commend you because you've been doing such a thorough job, so I only have a couple of comments. Mr. Frankel is proposing a maximum cap based on today's standards for the water usage, but I would say there shouldn't be any sort of maximum cap, because look at what's happening. Did anybody have any idea that our rivers would be so low? It's just a couple of years ago that we were saying, oh, we better watch out because our wells are running dry. And they did. And just the other comment that I have is when you mentioned the multifamily housing, actually, it's not up to the city and, or any of our zoning, as we know, it's up to the state. So we really have no say over that once the project is approved. I don't know, because you've been talking about these small lots, if they could even do that, but I think that's a consideration too. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Tricia Searcy, 734 Fairview Avenue. Thank you very much, and I again also appreciate the thoroughness with which you're approaching this, because it really makes me feel better just to hear this, because one of my grave concerns has been the lack of specificity in the specific plan. So with regard to that, somebody mentioned in the beginning, I think Commissioner Hutt, but it's up to them, residential versus institutional. And when I think of that, it's not residential versus institutional, it's specific plan. I just think it's so critically important that that plan will supersede our code. And so you all have been really good about saying you need to have these things up front. And I just really want to encourage you to do that. Yes, require the things that are important to you in the plan or in the development agreement, because then it will be too late. With that regard, let's see, there was, I appreciate all the focus on what's going on with the sizing of the houses. That's a huge thing. But also, I don't want to lose track of the big, broad issues like fire and water. And the net zero water is not, the way that they're defining it is nothing to do with, say, I had it pulled up here, the EPA definition, achieving net zero water means limiting the consumption of water resources and returning it back to the same watershed so as not to deplete the resources of that region in quantity or quality over the course of the year. So that's the EPA definition. What they're talking about is something entirely different, and it's kind of their own made-up concept about net zero water. And they've offered these 3 different possibilities, and each one is just an idea. There's no relationship, there's no correlation between, will this actually achieve net zero? We don't know. There just is a monetary price tag put on it. We're gonna give you $21,000 each time we pull a permit. That's it, and then there's a cap on it. So there's just to say net zero water is a benefit, a community benefit. First of all, MIG said it's not a community benefit to say that you're not gonna overburden the city in the first place, but there's just no correlation to say that this could ever accomplish what they say it could accomplish. So I don't know what to do about that, how you could enforce it. I would say the only thing would be to say, have them do the studies to prove that this could actually happen. Otherwise, it's just an aspiration. And then also with the fire, there have been numerous decisions that have come down from courts recently that disallowed projects in high fire severity zones, alluding to the Paradise Fire and that sort of thing in this situation just like ours. And one of the key factors, it seems to me, is this off-site project for Carter to alleviate that concern, to make it more safe for evacuation. However, that off-site plan has not been adequately studied under the EIR. It was slipped in there, and so agencies didn't get to review it, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife previously, before that even, submitted a comment expressing concern about the impact of the project as it was on Bailey Canyon. And those studies that they requested were not done. So I would also, urge you to consider that, to consider the off-site plan as something that really needs to be looked at. It's gonna have a huge impact. And if that can't be done, because that's also, to my mind, a taking of public land and giving it to one private property owner without consulting with the public. That's public land. So it's not part of their private property rights to build this project if it requires them to take public land. An easement is a property right. Okay. All right, that's it. Thanks very much.
Alex Arietta, Edge you. Again, I also want to say thank you very much for being very thoughtful, being very thorough and diligent. I think, Commissioner Peggy calling out the specific numbers on the house sizes was particularly insightful and frankly enlightening, not just for the planning commissioners, but I think for everyone present. So I want to thank you for being so engaged this evening. Secondly, I want to talk just quickly about the fire, because I think that while the home sizes clearly are of paramount concern for the community, the bigger issues too, as well as around fire and water, cannot be lost and should not be given short shrift in your discussions and your consideration of this project. I wanted to remind the Planning Commission about a Thomas fire that happened in Ventura just 3 years ago. It was a brand new development of 10 homes built with similar and comparable fire retardant materials that were torched completely as parts of Santa Barbara went up and Ventura went up. So I really want the Planning Commission to give serious thought to this, because that fire happened in a very comparable space with a canyon, such as our Bailey Canyon. They created some tunnels where flames and embers were able to surface quickly. And these are 10 brand new homes built with the same fire retardant material. So we just can't give short shrift to the fire risk on this, and I really want the Planning Commission to be reminded of that. Lastly, I really want to emphasize that I think it was frankly rather presumptuous tonight for Mr. Franco to expect the project to be forwarded on to the City Council. There is so much on the plate that was being discussed this evening. It was clear and evident that there are still many outstanding significant questions, but yet the gall that you would somehow approve it and push it through to City Council with a list of a bunch of significant considerations. But I also think it's indicative of why the community at large has such little trust in New Urban West. Because this is the ramrodding approach that they have been taking to push this project through, whether it's been through flyers, marketing materials, and so forth. I was not surprised to see this tonight, but I'm glad you saw it, because you're getting a sense of what the broader community has been going through for the last 2 years. And I hope that you can seriously take an even greater degree of scrutiny on this project going forward. Thank you again very much for your engagement with this.
Brookside Lane. Just want to say thank you so much. What I have to say is very moot compared to what you're dealing with the legal issues and the positions you're in, but we all did see a few days ago the sign on the freeway saying severe drought, save water, save California. I just want to add save Sierra Madre, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Robert Girardi, Vista Circle Drive. Make a couple quick comments. Net zero, if one of the ways of achieving net zero is to repair leaks in the existing system, and I think that is definitely a community benefit because we're all paying for those leaks. Fire, I don't know of any court cases that prevent building in infill areas, which this project is. I understand if you're building out into the wildlands, it's different. Carter, I don't understand what the question is about private land. If the road is widened, it's going to be a public road, so it's not property that's going to the development or the developer or the passionists. That would be public land. It's just shifting from city land into the county land a little bit. And I'm all about concessions and protecting open space and the hillsides. I think there is an issue, having talked to the city attorney about if you make the upper 10 acres open space, there can be some accessory structures built, not habitable spaces, but in open space, it has to be open space related structures, which could be related to recreation or something, but that's not necessarily, there's a question if you build a shrine or something, whether that would fall into an open space structure. So I think to protect the passionist rights, while I've supported doing open space, maybe it's better to leave it institutional with some other restrictions, such as an easement on there. And then I'm not sure, it was mentioned that the city is not interested in holding title to the northern properties, and I'm curious when the city decided that, because I haven't seen it discussed in any deliberations by the Planning Commission or the City Council. And it confuses me because the general plan says the city should be acquiring hillside properties and building the corridor across the top of the hillsides. So I'd like to know who made the decision that the city isn't interested in those properties, especially when the Passionists and the developer and the Planning Commission and city staff and City Council all approved the MOU, which said that the city would be getting some hillside properties. And then the Sierra Madre Mountain Conservancy and the straight line issue, that doesn't make sense to me. Who cares if it's a straight line or a squiggly line or a circle? The Planning Commission and the City Council should be determining what properties and what shape they are going to go into Conservancy, and then it's up to the Conservancy to say they want to hold those or they don't. If they don't, there are other conservancies that can hold those properties. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alice Wichello. I'm at 571 West Sierra Madre Boulevard, and I want to thank the Planning Commission for allowing me to speak and for your dedicated work and effort. I really, really appreciate it. I'm just here, real short, here to request that public comment be allowed at every meeting, that the Meadows project is on the agenda, as I believe that it's what's fair to the committee, to the community. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, well, bring it back to the commission for, I guess, kind of a messy recommendation, a motion on what we're going to do next. Anybody have an idea? Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I think we should continue it, and it's just a question of whether it's a date certain or a date uncertain. Guidance from staff?
Of course, I would prefer a date certain. Again, this is also a question for the applicant, given the number of elements that need to be considered and preparing exhibits for your review.
I think providing updates as they're ready is preferable to having to read 1,000 pages.
Okay.
And I won't be here at the next meeting, so it'll be in July maybe.
And I believe Vice Chair Dennison, are you out as well?
Yeah, as well.
You're here. Okay.
Chair President, if I may, just as to the date,
Yeah.
I think we've got a lot of great feedback, and we'd be prepared to re-engage and provide the additional detail that you've requested on July 7th.
Thank you. Yeah, because I'm out next meeting too. I think I'd let you know that, so, sorry.
So that means we have
2 members out.
2 members out on July 7th.
No, I'll be here July 7th, I'm sorry. I just won't be at the next meeting, but I'll be here at the July 7th meeting. I should anyway.
All right, I move that we continue this hearing to a date certain of July 7.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So I guess maybe I'll ask this, anybody from the anything from the Planning Commission? Reports? Messages?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Nothing? I have nothing other than just what I stated. Be out next meeting, so you have to.
Happy to take the next meeting for you.
Okay.
That'd be even better.
Vince, you're up.
Do we have anything
Yes.
for the next meeting?
So we do have a an appeal, a staff decision appealed by an adjacent property owner. So that's going to be before the commission on June 16th.
Okay. Property.
And that concludes my report.
Okay, wow. Finish with a bang, great. All right. Then I will adjourn our meeting to, what's the day I'm gonna be gone? 17th?
June 16th.
June 16th. Very good, thank you. Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to move the project forward. Oh, yeah, no. I will put some thoughts together, send it in an email to you and Jose and Alex. Carolyn, thank you.
I've been there on my road like this. I go, this I gotta see. So we did.
You were right. Let us.
I think you did better than I did, because he was more careful about it. Pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, I would do it.
Traction.